Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back, far back, to a land of golden sands and a river that breathes life into the desert. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. Towering pyramids scratching at a sapphire sky, the serene, coal-lined eyes of a pharaoh staring into eternity from a golden mask, and the silent poetry of hieroglyphs carved into stone. It's a beautiful dream, isn't it? A world of majesty, mystery, and divine power. Well, tonight we're going to gently set that dream aside, because you are not a pharaoh. You are not a high priest or a noble. And let's just say your odds of making it to lunch are slim. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, I'd love to see where in the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. It's always so nice to see our little community stretching across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. There is no gentle alarm clock, no soft melody coaxing you from your slumber. Your first sensation is the light. It isn't the kind, diffused light of a cloudy morning, but a blade of pure, white gold intensity that slices through the single, small, high window of your home. It's the light of Ra, the sun god, in his vessel, and he is not a gentle master. Even now, just after dawn, you can feel the air already beginning to thicken with a heat that will soon become a physical weight upon your shoulders. You stir, not from a soft mattress, but from a reed mat laid directly upon the hard-packed earthen floor. The straw beneath you is dry and brittle, and it crackles softly with every movement, a sound like autumn leaves underfoot. It smells faintly of dust, river mud, and your own sweat from the long, hot night. You push yourself up, your back and neck protesting. There are no pillows here, no plush support for your head. Instead, you've spent the night with your neck resting in the hard, curved cradle of a wooden or stone headrest. It sounds uncomfortable, and it is. Think less of a pillow and more of a display stand for your head, designed to keep your elaborate hairstyle, if you were lucky enough to have one, from being crushed. For you, it's mostly just to keep your head off a floor that is occasionally visited by scorpions and other unwelcome guests. It's the ancient world's version of an ergonomic nightmare, but it's all you've ever known. You sit up fully, and the air you breathe is not fresh. It's thick, carrying the scent of the nearby cooking fires already being lit, the ever-present smell of the sluggish canal nearby, and the dry, mineral tang of the desert that surrounds everything. Your home is a simple, 1 or 2 room structure made of mud bricks, sun-dried blocks of Nile mud mixed with straw. It's a marvel of ancient engineering, perfectly suited to the climate. The thick walls do a decent job of insulating you from the worst of the daytime furnace, keeping the interior relatively cool. But cool is a very relative term. It's the difference between an oven and a slightly less hot oven. The floor beneath your bare feet is cool for now, a small, fleeting mercy. You look around the small space. It is sparse. A few clay pots for water and grain lean against a wall. A small, low table. Perhaps a chest holding the family's few valuable possessions. A spare linen tunic. A copper mirror if you were exceptionally well off, which you are not. This is the reality that the gleaming artifacts in our museums don't show you. We see the gilded sarcophagi, the intricate jewelry, the statues of kings and queens carved from diorite to last for eternity. But that was the 1%. That was the life built for the next world, for an eternity of perfection. Your world is this one. It is the life of the 99%, the farmers, the laborers, the potters, the people whose sweat and toil formed the very foundation upon which those pyramids were built. Historians still argue about the precise social structure and the day-to-day freedoms of the common Egyptian farmer, but one thing is certain. Your life is governed not by the year, but by the 3 seasons of the Nile. There is Ake, the season of the inundation, when the river swells and floods the land, depositing a layer of rich, black silt. This is a time of waiting, of mending tools, and working on state-building projects. Then comes Parate, the growing season, when the waters recede, and you toil from sunrise to sunset, plowing the moist earth and sowing the seeds. And finally Shimu, the harvest season, a time of back-breaking labor under the most relentless sun, gathering the grain that will feed your family, and more importantly, fill the granaries of the temple and the pharaoh. Your calendar is the river. Your clock is the sun. Your master is the land itself, and the gods who command it. You stand and stretch, your joints popping in the quiet of the morning. A fine layer of dust covers everything, including you. It's a souvenir from the desert winds that whisper through every crack and opening. This is the Egypt you now inhabit. Not the Egypt of Hollywood, with its clean, dramatic vistas and pristine linen robes. This is an earthier, grittier place. A place where survival is a daily negotiation with the elements. The grand theological dramas and the intricate politics of the royal court are a world away. Your concerns are far more immediate. Is there enough water in the pot? Will the harvest be good? And most pressingly, what unseen dangers lurk in the murky waters of the Nile where you are about to take your morning bath? You feel a phantom itch on your skin, a mixture of sweat and dust. The sun is climbing higher, its light now flooding the small room. Your day has begun, and it will be a long one. You step out of the cool darkness of your hut into the full, unapologetic glare of the sun. The world is already alive with the low hum of activity. The air is warmer now, no longer holding the memory of the night's meager chill. You pick up a rough linen cloth and an empty clay jar, the essential tools for your morning ablutions, and begin the short walk towards the source of all life here, the Nile. The path is not paved, of course. It's a track of compressed dust and earth, worn smooth by the passage of countless bare feet. You pass other homes, nearly identical to your own, their inhabitants emerging just as you are, a slow and steady trickle of humanity drawn to the water's edge. The smell of smoke from cooking fires mixes with the rich, fertile scent of the riverbank ahead, a smell of wet earth, decaying reeds, and something else, something heavy and ancient. Reaching the river, you see it's already a hub of social activity. This is not a private, serene bathing experience. This is the communal bathroom, kitchen sink, and water cooler all in one. Women are further down, filling large clay pots with water for the day's needs, chatting and laughing as they balance the heavy burdens on their heads for the walk back. Children splash in the shallows, their joyful shouts echoing over the water, a sound that makes the back of your neck prickle with a low-grade anxiety. You know, as every adult here knows, that the river gives life, but it also takes it. This is not a gentle, babbling brook. It is a slow, powerful, and opaque god. You wade into the water. It's surprisingly cool against your skin, a welcome shock that washes away the first layer of sleep and sweat. But the clarity ends at your ankles. Below the surface, the water is a murky, swirling brown, thick with the silt that makes this land fertile. You can't see the bottom. You can't see your own feet. And you definitely can't see what else might be sharing this water with you. Your mind paints a picture of the famous Nile crocodile, a living relic from a time of monsters, lying patient and silent in the mud. They are a constant and respected danger. But the quirky truth that locals understand is that the greater, more immediate threat often comes from the hippopotamus. They look so deceptively placid, like giant, smooth river stones. But they are fiercely territorial and responsible for more human deaths than any other large animal in the region. You keep your eyes scanning the surface, not for a scaly snout, but for a pair of ears and nostrils to break the water's skin. A sudden swirl 20 feet away makes your heart beat a little faster, but it's just a large fish. Probably. There is no soap. No fragrant bar of oils and herbs. Your cleaning agent is the riverbed itself. You bend down, scoop up a handful of wet sand and silt, and begin to scrub your skin. It's a vigorous, abrasive exfoliation, sloughing off the dirt and grime of the previous day. Some, who are slightly better off or live near the great natron deposits of the Wadi El Natron, might have a lump of the salty mineral. Natron is a naturally occurring blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, a powerful desiccant and cleanser. It's the same stuff the embalmers use to dry out the bodies of the dead for mummification, a fact you try not to dwell on as you imagine it scouring your skin. Egyptologists debate whether the average person used natron regularly or simply relied on abrasive sand and water. But for you, today, it's the gritty mud. It does the job, more or less. You rinse, feeling cleaner, if not exactly refreshed in the modern sense. Your daily bath has been a success, in that you are emerging with all of your limbs still attached. A low bar for a spa day, but a success nonetheless. You make your way back to your dwelling, the sun already beginning to dry your skin and your simple linen kilt. The smell of baking bread is stronger now, a comforting, grainy aroma that speaks of sustenance. You enter your home to find your breakfast waiting. It is the foundation of the entire Egyptian diet, the two things that have fueled this civilization for 1,000 years, bread and beer. But put away any thought of a light, fluffy sourdough or a crisp, cold lager. This is something else entirely. The bread known as ta is a small, dense, round loaf. It was made from emmer wheat, a tough and ancient grain. To make flour, the women of the household, or you yourself, if you live alone, spend hours grinding the grains between two heavy stones, a saddle quern. It's exhausting work, and tiny particles of sand and stone from the quern inevitably mix with the flour. There is no way to sieve it all out. As you take your first bite, you feel it immediately. The bread is heavy, yes, and hearty, but it is also inescapably gritty. You have to chew slowly and deliberately, your teeth grinding against the fine sand that has been baked into your meal. It's a universal feature of life here. The examination of mummies from all social classes reveals teeth worn down to the pulp, a direct result of a lifetime of eating this sandy, abrasive bread. It's not a flaw in the recipe, it's just a fact of life. To wash it down, you have a bowl of beer. This isn't a recreational beverage for a sunny afternoon. This is henket, and it's a form of liquid nutrition. It's thick, soupy, and only very mildly alcoholic. It was brewed from loaves of twice-baked bread, crumbled and fermented in water. The resulting brew is more like a thin, slightly sour porridge or a liquid sourdough starter than any beer you might recognize. It's packed with calories, B vitamins, and protein, and the fermentation process kills off many of the harmful bacteria that might be in the river water, making it a safer source of hydration. It's not for pleasure, it's fuel. You drink it straight from the clay bowl, its thick texture coating your mouth. It tastes earthy, a little sweet, a little sour. This is your breakfast. A piece of sandy bread and a bowl of soupy beer. It fills your stomach, providing the calories you will desperately need for the long day of labor ahead. There is no lingering over the meal, no savoring of complex flavors. It is a purely functional act. You have refueled your body. The sun is now high enough to cast short, sharp shadows. The brief morning routine is over. Now the real work begins. With the grainy taste of your breakfast still in your mouth, you join the silent procession of your neighbors heading out to the fields. The sun, your constant companion and adversary, has climbed higher, burning off the last vestiges of morning mist. The air is clear and dry, and the world is painted in stark contrasts. The deep, vibrant green of the irrigated land, the rich, almost black earth at your feet, the pale tan of the desert shimmering in the distance, and the relentless blue of the sky above. Your destination is the land that your family works, a plot allocated to you by the local temple or a state official. It is not yours. You are merely its caretaker, its servant. The land, like everything else, ultimately belongs to the pharaoh. You arrive at the edge of a field, dark and fertile from the Nile's recent embrace. Your tools are not waiting for you in a neat shed. They are simple, timeless, and waiting right where they were left. A wooden ard, which is a primitive plow, with a tip that might be hardened by fire or, if you're fortunate, tipped with a small piece of copper. There is no heavy, magnificent ox to pull it for you. The beast of burden is you, and perhaps a brother or a son, leaning your weight into a wooden crossbar, digging your bare feet into the soft, yielding earth as you carve a shallow furrow. The mud squishes up between your toes, cool for a moment before the sun begins to bake it into a dry crust. Your work for the day, however, is at the canal. The crops have been sown, and now they are thirsty. Your task is to give them a drink, a job that will consume your entire day and every ounce of your energy. You stand before a device that is both an ingenious invention and an instrument of torture, the shaduf. It's a simple, elegant piece of engineering, a long wooden pole pivoted on a central post. On one end hangs a leather bucket or a heavy jar. On the other is a large, heavy counterweight made of river mud, stones, and clay. Your job is to work the bucket end. You grab the pole, pulling it down. The motion forces you into a deep squat, your back protesting as you lower the bucket into the life-giving water of the irrigation ditch. It fills with a soft glug. Then, with the help of the counterweight, you rise, your legs and back straining as you guide the now heavy bucket upwards. You pivot the entire apparatus, swinging the water over to a smaller channel that feeds the thirsty rows of barley and emmer wheat. You tip the bucket, the water cascades out with a splash, and the cycle begins again. Down, dip, up, pivot, tip. Down, dip, up, pivot, tip. The rhythm is hypnotic. Your mind empties of everything but the motion. The sun beats down on your exposed back and the back of your neck. You are nothing but a simple linen kilt, and your skin, though accustomed to the sun, burns. You can feel the sweat beating on your forehead and trickling down your spine, but it evaporates almost as soon as it appears. There is no shade. There are no breaks mandated by a sympathetic human resources department. There is only the work. Your hands, calloused and tough, are raw from gripping the rough wood of the pole. Your shoulders ache with a deep, burning fire. The shaduf is the original stairmaster from hell, a full-body workout with no goal other than survival. You are not alone. All along the canal, other farmers are engaged in the same repetitive dance. Sometimes, a rhythmic chant or a simple song will rise from a work gang, not out of joy, but to keep the pace, to create a shared rhythm that makes the endless work a fraction more bearable. An overseer, a man from the local temple or a state functionary, stands on the bank. He doesn't work. He watches. He carries a staff or a rod, a symbol of his authority and a very real tool of motivation. He is not your friend. He is the embodiment of the system. And what a system it is. You don't complain. You don't lean on your shadow pole and sigh about your aching back or the blistering heat. To do so would be more than just insubordination. It would be a form of blasphemy. The pharaoh, your king, is a living god. He is the earthly incarnation of Horus, the son of Osiris. His role is to maintain Ma'at, the fundamental cosmic order of truth, justice, balance, and harmony. The universe is a delicate, ordered machine, and the pharaoh is its chief engineer. The sun rising, the Nile flooding, the crops growing, all of this is a reflection of Ma'at being upheld. For you to complain about your labor, the labor that feeds the nation and builds the temples, is to suggest that the divine order is flawed. It's like looking at the sun and saying, you know, you're a bit too bright today. It's an act of chaos, an insult to the gods and their chosen representative on earth. Historians and archaeologists still debate the exact level of coercion versus willing participation in state labor projects, like the building of pyramids or temples during the inundation season. Was it forced slave labor, or a form of national service, a civic and religious duty that everyone was expected to perform? For you, in this field, the distinction is academic. You work because you must. To shirk your duty is to risk a beating from the overseer's stick, a common and casual form of punishment depicted in countless tomb paintings. It is also to risk your family's food allotment. But most deeply, it is to step outside the bounds of Ma'at, to invite chaos into your life. And in a world filled with so many real and supernatural dangers, inviting more chaos is the last thing you would ever want to do. So you work. The sun climbs to its zenith, directly overhead, merciless. The heat is a physical presence, shimmering over the fields. The air you breathe is hot. The water you lift seems to evaporate before it even hits the soil. Your world has shrunk to the bucket, the pole, the water, and the sun. There is no past, no future, only the endless, grueling now. Down, dip, up, pivot, tip. This is your life, and the day is only half over. As the afternoon wears on, the sun begins its slow descent, but the heat lingers, radiating from the very earth you stand on. You are finally released from the shadow, your muscles trembling with exhaustion. You trudge back toward your village, a film of dried mud and sweat clinging to your skin. But the work of survival isn't over. It merely changes its form. Now you must face the more insidious, ever-present hardships of your daily life, the things that wear you down not through brute force, but through relentless persistence. The first of these is the sand. You remember it from your breakfast bread this morning, but its tyranny is absolute. It is the defining feature of your environment, an unwelcome guest in every aspect of your existence. A slight breeze, a common occurrence as the desert air cools, is enough to lift a fine, almost invisible veil of sand and carry it everywhere. It works its way into the folds of your linen kilt, creating a subtle, chafing irritation against your skin. It settles on the water in the storage jars, forming a thin film on the surface. It finds its way into the simple stew your family might be preparing for the evening meal, adding that familiar, unwelcome crunch to every bite. This isn't just an annoyance, it's a long-term health hazard. That constant abrasion, which we noted earlier with the bread, is slowly but surely destroying your teeth. Dental pathology is one of the most common ailments found in Egyptian mummies. Teeth are often worn flat, leading to painful abscesses, infections, and eventually tooth loss. And without modern dentistry, a severe toothache isn't just a nuisance, it can be a life-threatening condition. Beyond the physical grit of the sand is the complex and inescapable framework of your spiritual world. Your religion is not something you attend for an hour once a week. It is the operating system for your entire life. The world is saturated with gods, spirits, and unseen forces, and navigating your day requires a constant series of small rituals and observances. You might murmur a quick prayer to Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth, as you pass a pregnant neighbor. You would be careful not to displease the local deities who inhabit a particular canal, tree, or field. Every town has its own patron god, and the national pantheon is a vast, bewildering family of deities with overlapping responsibilities. There's Ra, the powerful sun god, Osiris, the king of the underworld, Isis, his devoted wife and a powerful magician, her son Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky and kingship, and Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of the dead. And that's just the A-list. There are hundreds more. This belief system provides structure and meaning, a way to understand a world that is often chaotic and unforgiving. A failed harvest isn't just bad luck, it's a sign that the gods are displeased. A sudden illness isn't just a biological event. It could be the result of a curse from an enemy or the work of a malicious demon. This means that staying on the right side of the divine is a constant preoccupation. You might carry a small amulet, perhaps a stone carved into the shape of an ankh for life or a jed pillar for stability, tucked into your kilt. It's your personal bit of spiritual insurance. Historians still debate whether the average Egyptian commoner had a deep, personal relationship with the great state gods, or if their daily worship was more focused on local deities and household protectors like Bes, the grotesque but friendly dwarf god who warded off evil spirits and protected women and children. Either way, your life is woven through with superstition and a deep-seated fear of angering the powers that be, both seen and unseen. This worldview extends directly into your understanding of health and medicine. If you were to fall ill or injure yourself, your trip would not be to a doctor's office, but to a place where science and magic are inextricably linked. Egyptian medicine was, in some ways, remarkably advanced for its time. Physicians understood the importance of a clean wound. They used honey, a natural antiseptic, to dress injuries. One famous medical text, the Ebers Papyrus, contains hundreds of remedies and magical spells, and it mentions using moldy bread to treat infections, a primitive, accidental form of penicillin. They could set broken bones and perform simple surgeries. But for every practical remedy, there was a magical one. A headache might be treated with a poultice applied to the head, but also with a spell that commanded the pain to leave your body. A stomach ailment might require an herbal concoction, but you would also recite an incantation to banish the demon believed to be causing it. The physician and the priest were often one and the same. There was no clean line between the physical and the supernatural. And what of your place in this society? If you are a woman, your life is, in many ways, just as grueling as a man's, though your domain is different. Egyptian women, it's widely known, enjoyed a remarkably high legal status compared to their counterparts in other ancient civilizations. You could own property, run a business, and even inherit the throne, in some rare cases. You could represent yourself in court, and were not considered the property of your husband. But these legal rights don't paint the full picture of your daily reality. Your life is still one of intense physical labor. You are the one who spends hours every day grinding the sandy grain for bread, a repetitive motion that puts immense strain on your back and knees. You are the one who trudges to the Nile for water, hauling the heavy pots back to the home. You are responsible for childcare, weaving linen cloth, a vital and time-consuming task, and preparing the meals. While men toiled in the fields under the sun, you toiled in and around the home. Neither role was easier than the other. They were just different sides of the same coin of survival. As twilight finally begins to soften the harsh edges of the landscape, you sit outside your small home, the day's heat slowly bleeding out of the earth. You are tired, not just physically tired from the labor, but weary from the constant, low-level stress of navigating this world. The grit in your teeth, the ache in your back, the small anxieties about gods and spirits, it all adds up. Your day has been a testament not to glory or empire, but to simple, hard-won endurance. As the sky deepens from bruised purple to a velvety, star-dusted black, the physical labors of the day may be over, but a different kind of anxiety begins to settle in. In the cool of the evening, with the world reduced to the flickering light of a single clay lamp burning sesame oil, your thoughts naturally turn from the struggles of this life to the immense, all-consuming concern of the next. The ancient Egyptian obsession with death was not morbid. It was a profound and pragmatic focus on continuity. This life, with all its hardship, was merely a short, difficult prelude to an eternity that you had to earn. And the process for earning it was terrifyingly specific. You sit on your reed mat, the same one you woke up on, and perhaps you listen to an elder telling stories, not just fables, but tales of the gods and the underworld that do it. These aren't just entertaining myths. They are your travel guide and rulebook for the most important journey you will ever take. You know that when you die, your BA, the part of your soul that is your personality, and your Ka, your life force, will separate from your physical body. The goal is for them to be reunited in the afterlife, allowing you to become an Akh, a blessed and effective spirit. But to get there, you must first navigate the treacherous landscape of the underworld and face the final judgment. The central event of this judgment is the weighing of the heart. You've seen it depicted on the walls of the tombs of the wealthy, if you've ever been near one, or perhaps on a scrap of papyrus. You picture the scene in your mind's eye. You will be led by the gentle, jackal-headed Anubis into the Hall of Two Truths. There, before the great god Osiris, Lord of the Dead, your heart will be placed on one side of a great golden scale. Your heart, the IB, was believed to be the seat of your intelligence, your memory, your conscience, and all your emotions. It was the record of every deed, good and bad, you ever committed. On the other side of the scale, the goddess Ma'at, the personification of that cosmic order you toil under every day, will place her single, white ostrich feather of truth. To pass the test, your heart must be lighter than the feather, or at least balance perfectly with it. To prove its purity, you must make a series of pronouncements known as the negative confession. You must stand before a tribunal of 42 divine judges and declare all the things you have not done. I have not committed sin. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not been deceitful. I have not made anyone weep. I have not been lazy. As you sit in the dark of your hut, you might mentally run through the list. Did you cut corners at the Shadif today? Were you truly honest when trading that small bundle of flax? That sharp word you had with a neighbor, did it cause them to weep? It's a daunting examination of conscience. Every small transgression, every moment of weakness, adds weight to your heart. And the stakes could not be higher. This is not a system of heaven and hell. There is no eternal damnation where you suffer for your sins. There is something far worse, total annihilation, utter oblivion. Crouched at the foot of the scales, you picture the most terrifying creature in the entire Egyptian pantheon, Ammit, the devourer of the dead. She is a grotesque chimera, with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, a terrifying mashup of the three most feared man-eaters in your world. If your heart is heavy with sin and fails the test, Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, will record the verdict, and Ammit will lurch forward and devour your heart. And with that single, final gulp, you are gone. Your soul, your memory, your very existence is erased from the cosmos forever. There is no second chance. You simply cease to be. The fear of this second death is a profound and motivating force in your life. It's why you try to live according to Ma'at, even when it's difficult. This deep-seated need for a successful transition to the afterlife explains the elaborate preparations for death that we see. The mummification, the tombs, the grave goods, all of it was practical magic, essential technology for eternity. While you, as a commoner, cannot afford the elaborate 70-day mummification process of a pharaoh, you still hope for a proper burial. You hope your family will have the resources to wrap your body in linen, place a few protective amulets among the wrappings, and bury you in a simple pit on the high ground of the desert, away from the Nile's floodwaters. The dry sand itself would do much of the work of preserving your body, a kind of natural mummification. A few clay pots with bread and beer would be placed with you, food for your ka on its journey. But there is one final, earthly fear that haunts your thoughts of eternal rest, the tomb robber. Even the simplest grave contains items that are valuable to the living. The linen wrappings, the amulets, even the pottery. For the wealthy, the tombs were treasure chests filled with gold, furniture, and precious oils. Tomb robbery was a constant problem throughout Egyptian history. It was considered one of the most heinous crimes, a desecration that not only stole a person's worldly goods, but could also jeopardize their afterlife by disturbing the body and its spiritual home. There were entire villages, like the famous Deir el-Medina, home to the artisans who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, where court records show that tomb robbery was a persistent and sometimes officially tolerated enterprise. It's a strange and unsettling thought. The very men who spent their days carving beautiful prayers for the dead king's eternal soul might spend their nights breaking into another tomb to steal for their own survival. The fringe theory that some tomb building was an inside job is a compelling one. As you lie down to sleep, you can only hope that your own humble grave will be too poor to attract such unwanted attention, and that your body will be left undisturbed to await its final, terrifying judgment. The first tentative hint of gray is just beginning to soften the eastern horizon. The deepest, coolest part of the night has passed, and soon the blade of the sun will slice through your window once again, restarting the cycle. You lie on your crackling reed mat, your body a landscape of aches. Your back from the shaduf, your teeth from the sand in your food, your mind weary from contemplating the cosmic terrors of Amit. Your one day in ancient Egypt is drawing to a close. Would you have survived it? Let's be gentle but honest. Probably not. Your journey began with a jolt, not from a soft bed but from a hard floor, your neck cradled in a stone headrest that feels like a medical device. You walked barefoot to a river teeming with seen and unseen dangers, from crocodiles to microscopic parasites, and exfoliated with sand because soap was a luxury you couldn't imagine. Your breakfast, the fuel for your grueling day, was a loaf of bread filled with stone dust and a bowl of thick, sour, lukewarm beer. A meal that would have your modern digestive system filing a formal complaint. Then came the work. Not a 9 to 5 in an air-conditioned office, but a sun-up-to-sundown struggle against gravity itself, hoisting bucket after bucket of water under a sun that felt less like a source of light and more like a physical weight. There were no safety guidelines, no ergonomic tools, no paid time off. Your boss was a literal god, which made submitting a grievance a rather complicated and blasphemous affair. You toiled in the knowledge that a portion of your hard-earned harvest would be taken as taxes to feed the priests, the officials, and the pharaoh, a system you accepted as part of the divine order, the ma'at that held the universe together. Throughout the day, you contended with the tyranny of sand, an omnipresent grit that wore down your teeth and infiltrated every meal. You navigated a world governed by a complex and demanding spiritual ecosystem, where a misspoken word or a forgotten offering could invite divine wrath or demonic affliction. Your medical plan was a mixture of surprisingly effective folk remedies, remember the moldy bread and honey, and magical spells that made you wonder if you were trying to cure a fever or perform an exorcism. Your social standing, whether as a man or a woman, locked you into a life of relentless physical labor, though you possessed legal rights that were, for the era, remarkably progressive. And as the sun finally set, offering a brief respite from the heat, your anxieties didn't cease. They merely shifted from the terrestrial to the eternal. You spent your evening contemplating the heavy weight of your own heart, hoping it would be as light as a feather on the day of your final judgment. You lived with the very real, visceral fear of total annihilation, of your soul being devoured by a crocodile lion hippo monster if you failed this ultimate test. Your greatest ambition wasn't to be rich or famous, but to have a simple, undisturbed burial that might allow your spirit to safely navigate the underworld and avoid that terrible, final oblivion. This was your day, and it would have been the same tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. It was a life of incredible hardship, balanced on a knife's edge between the life-giving Nile and the all-consuming desert. It was a life of profound physical toil, underscored by a constant, low-level hum of spiritual anxiety. It's easy for us, from the comfort of our modern lives, to look back and see only the struggle, to see the dirt, the disease, the back-breaking labor, and to shudder. But that's only half the story. To endure such a life required a strength we can barely comprehend, a resilience forged in the heat of the sun and the mud of the Nile. These were the people who, for 3,000 years, maintained one of the most stable and enduring civilizations in human history. They built monuments so magnificent that we still marvel at their construction. They developed complex systems of writing, governance, and religion. They created art of breathtaking beauty and imbued their world with a deep, spiritual meaning that guided their every action. They weren't just surviving, they were building. They were creating. They were living lives of purpose within the framework they understood. Their laughter in the cool of the evening, the stories they told their children, their love for their families, their hope for a perfect eternity. These things were as real as the grit in their bread and the ache in their backs. So as you lie here now, at the end of our journey, let the image of ancient Egypt settle in your mind. Not the golden, romanticized dream, but this grittier, more human reality. Acknowledge the immense difficulty, the daily struggle you almost certainly would not have survived. But also, hold a quiet sense of awe for the people who did. The millions of anonymous farmers, laborers, and artisans who rose with the sun each day, faced the hardships, and through their collective, unending effort, built a civilization that has captivated the world for millennia. They were tougher, more resilient, and more enduring than we can probably ever imagine. And now perhaps it's time for you to drift off to your own well-earned rest, on your own soft pillow, grateful for the simple comforts they never knew. The serpent's gaze, power, blood, and mystery at Teotihuacan. You find yourself standing at the edge of a place that feels impossible. The air is thin here, high up on the semi-arid plateau of central Mexico, and the sun has a clean, sharp intensity you don't find at sea level. Before you, a great stone avenue stretches into the distance, so wide and impossibly straight it seems to pull the horizon toward you. It's a road built for giants, for gods, for a purpose so profound that it required reshaping the very earth. This is the place the Aztecs would later find, centuries after its fall, and name Teotihuacan, the birthplace of the gods. You begin to walk. Your footsteps are soft on the ancient paving stones, a quiet, rhythmic counterpoint to the low hum of the wind. The silence is the first thing you truly notice. It's a deep, resonant quiet, a silence that has soaked into the very bedrock of this city over 1,000 years of abandonment. The sounds of a modern world are far away, replaced by the whisper of dry grasses and the vast, empty sky above. This grand thoroughfare you are on is called the Avenue of the Dead. A rather grim name, you might think, for such a majestic place. The name, like that of the city itself, comes from the Aztecs. When they stumbled upon these magnificent ruins, they saw the smaller, platform-like pyramids lining the avenue and assumed they must be the tombs of ancient kings or mythical giants. The Aztecs, never ones to miss a chance for dramatic flair, imagined a procession of royal funeral rites unfolding along this very path. It's a powerful image, but one that is almost certainly wrong. These were likely not tombs at all, but ceremonial platforms, bases for temples that are now long gone, their wooden structures and thatched roofs reclaimed by time. You pause, looking at the sheer scale of it all. The avenue runs for more than 1.5 miles, perfectly aligned about 15.5 degrees east of true north. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, almost obsessive act of cosmic alignment, a way of anchoring the city to the movements of the stars, perhaps to the rising of the Pleiades star cluster, or the setting of the sun on specific, sacred days. The entire city is a map of the cosmos, laid out on the valley floor. It's a road built by people who clearly didn't have to worry about municipal paving budgets or difficult terrain. They simply decided where the center of their world would be, and then they made it so. To your right and left, the smaller platforms rise in stepped tiers. Today, they are the color of pale, sun-bleached stone. But you must imagine them as they once were. Imagine them covered in a smooth, brilliant white lime plaster, a material called cal, which would have gleamed under the high-altitude sun, making the entire city a beacon visible for miles. And this plaster was not just white. It was a canvas. Vivid murals of jaguars, coyotes, and eagles, of priests with elaborate feathered headdresses, of gods with strange, goggle-like eyes, would have covered nearly every surface. The city wasn't a silent, monochrome ruin. It was a vibrant, almost overwhelmingly colorful expression of a complex and deeply held faith. And who were these people? Who were the Teotihuacanos? This is the central, aching mystery of this place. We don't know what they called themselves. We don't know for certain what language they spoke. We have no records of their kings or their specific histories. Their writing system, if it can be called that, was pictographic and still hasn't been fully deciphered. They are a ghost civilization, a people defined not by their words, but by the sheer, undeniable weight of what they left behind. Trying to understand who they were is like trying to read a book where the first 50 pages, the ones with all the characters and plot, have been politely but firmly ripped out. As you walk, you notice that the ground in some areas seems to shimmer with a faint, silvery light. If you were to look closer, you would find countless tiny flakes of mica embedded in the floors of what were once important plazas or ritual spaces. This isn't just a quirky decoration. This mica was mined and brought here from sources over 2,000 miles away in what is now Brazil. The effort would have been immense, a logistical puzzle of staggering proportions. Why? What was so important about this shimmering stone? Did it represent the starry night sky, the surface of a sacred body of water? Or was it just the most prestigious and exotic building material they could find, a way of showing off a bit of divine bling? We simply don't know. The society that built this was, for a time, the most powerful and influential in all of Mesoamerica. At its peak around 450 AD, Teotihuacan was a sprawling metropolis of over 125,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the entire world at that time. Larger than any city in Europe, including Rome after its decline. Its influence, its pottery, its architectural styles, and its obsidian tools spread for hundreds of miles, reaching deep into the Maya heartlands. But for all its power, its internal structure remains a subject of intense debate. Historians still argue whether Teotihuacan was ruled by a single all-powerful king, a council of elites representing different powerful families, or even a collective of allied noble houses. Unlike the Maya or the Egyptians, there are no grand statues of individual rulers here, no steely boasting of one king's conquests. The art focuses on gods, on forces of nature, on priests and warriors, but rarely on a distinct, named individual. The power here was real, but its face remains hidden, shrouded in a collective, almost corporate anonymity. Looking ahead, you see them, looming at the end of the long walk, dominating the skyline. To your right, the immense, broad-shouldered bulk of the Pyramid of the Sun. To your left, at the northern terminus of the avenue, the more graceful but no less imposing Pyramid of the Moon. They don't feel like buildings. They feel like geological features, like mountains that have been patiently carved and shaped by human hands over generations. They are patient, silent, and they seem to watch you as you slowly, step by step, make your way toward them. They are the heart of the mystery, the reason this city exists. And as you get closer, you feel a subtle shift in the air, a sense of gravity, of approaching something truly sacred, a place where the barrier between the earthly and the divine was once worn thin. The journey down this long, quiet avenue is just the beginning. You drift away from the center of the avenue, your path curving towards the titanic structure on your right. This is the Pyramid of the Sun. To say it is large is an understatement. It is a presence. It has its own gravity. Standing at its base, you have to crane your neck back to see the top, a flat platform where a temple once greeted the dawn. The pyramid's base is nearly 740 feet on each side, almost identical to that of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. But unlike its Egyptian cousin, this is not a tomb. It is a solid man-made mountain, a giant stage for rituals that connected the city to the cosmos. You reach out and touch the stone. It's rough, volcanic rock, warm from the sun. Think for a moment of the effort. The people who built this had no metal tools for quarrying, no wheels for transport, no beasts of burden like oxen or horses to pull heavy loads. Every single stone, every basket of dirt, every pound of the 2.5 million tons of material used to construct this behemoth was moved by human hands and human backs. You can almost hear the ghost of a Teotihuacano project manager sighing, realizing they're already behind schedule on a 20-year construction plan because someone forgot to order enough baskets. The sheer collective will required is staggering. It speaks of a society with an astonishing ability to organize and command labor, a society where the sacred and the civic were one and the same. The Pyramid of the Sun was built with breathtaking speed, likely in a single construction phase around 200 AD. It wasn't just placed randomly on the landscape. Its builders found something first. Directly beneath the center of the pyramid lies a natural lava tube, a cave over 300 feet long that terminates in a chamber shaped like a four-leaf clover. This cave was there long before the city. It was a natural shrine, a sacred place. In many Mesoamerican creation myths, humanity emerges from a cave, from the womb of the earth. By building their largest pyramid directly on top of this cave, the Teotihuacanos were making a profound statement. They were anchoring their city to the very point of creation, declaring this spot to be the Axis Mundi, the center of the universe, where the celestial, earthly, and underworlds all met. Imagine, for a moment, climbing it. You place your foot on the first of the 248 steps. They are steep, much steeper and narrower than modern stairs. There are no handrails here, of course. Ancient civilizations had a much more relaxed attitude toward public safety litigation. As you ascend, the world begins to fall away. The smaller platforms lining the Avenue of the Dead shrink, their true geometric precision becoming clear from above. The wind picks up, a steady, cool breeze that whispers past your ears. With each step, the air thins just a little more. You pause halfway up, turning to look back. The city unfolds before you, a breathtaking grid of stone and plaster, silent under the vast blue sky. The people below would have looked like ants, tiny figures moving through a divine architectural diagram. At the summit, you would have found the temple. Nothing of it remains today, but it would have been the most sacred space, perhaps housing an idol or a sacred bundle. It's from here that priests would have tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, and Venus, their calendars precise and their cosmology complex. It was here, on this high altar, that the power of the city was renewed through ceremonies we can only guess at. From this vantage point, you are as close to the sun as human hands could manage. Now you turn your gaze north, to the end of the Avenue of the Dead. There, perfectly framed by the rugged peak of the mountain Cerro Gordo behind it, sits the Pyramid of the Moon. It is slightly smaller than the Sun Pyramid, but many find it more beautiful. Its placement is perfect, its silhouette echoing the shape of the sacred mountain it honors. It feels less like a blunt statement of power and more like a work of sublime, harmonious landscape architecture. If the Pyramid of the Sun was built in one great heave, the Pyramid of the Moon was a more layered affair. Archaeologists have discovered it was built in at least 7 different phases, each new, larger pyramid encasing the one before it like a set of stone nesting dolls. It seems every so often, the rulers decided it was time for an upgrade, a celestial home renovation project. And with each new layer, they made a deposit. Buried deep within these construction layers, archaeologists have found dedicatory caches, ritual offerings to consecrate the new structure. These are not just collections of pottery and jade. They are grim tableaus. They have found the remains of sacrificed individuals, their hands often bound behind their backs. Alongside them were the remains of their fellow travelers to the underworld, jaguars, pumas, wolves, and golden eagles, many of which appear to have been caged and buried alive. There were also serpents, including rattlesnakes, whose presence adds another layer of dangerous, chthonic power to the site. This discovery has shifted our understanding of Teotihuacan. For a long time, it was thought to be a peaceful, theocratic city, a contrast to the more overtly militaristic cultures of Mesoamerica. But these burials tell a different story, one of state-sponsored ritual violence at the very heart of its religious life. The purpose of the Pyramid of the Moon is still debated. Historians still argue whether the Pyramid of the Moon's primary function was tied to a water and fertility cult centered on the mountain behind it, or if it served as a stage for martial displays, a place where captured warriors from rival cities were sacrificed to awe and intimidate. Instead of climbing this second pyramid, you remain in its plaza, the Plaza of the Moon. From here, you look south, back down the Great Avenue. The view is one of the most iconic in all of ancient America. The Avenue of the Dead stretches out before you, a perfect stone spine, flanked by its temple platforms. In the distance, the Pyramid of the Sun rises to your left, and further beyond, the hazy outlines of the mountains that ring the valley. You are seeing the city as it was meant to be seen, a perfectly ordered human cosmos set against the wildness of nature. It's a view designed to inspire awe, to communicate a sense of inescapable order and power. You've stood before the gateways to the sun and the moon, but the city holds more secrets than just its 2 great pyramids. The heart of its political power, and its most fearsome deity, lie waiting for you just off the main avenue. You turn away from the grand vista of the Plaza of the Moon and walk back towards the Avenue of the Dead, but this time you cross it. You are heading toward a massive, sunken square, a vast enclosure walled off from the rest of the city. This is the Citadel, or La Ciudadela. The name, given by the Spanish, is a bit misleading. It wasn't a military fortress in the European sense, though its high walls, almost 2,000 feet long on each side, certainly project an image of formidable power. This was the political and religious core of the city, a space where the state's authority was performed and reinforced. As you step inside the enclosure, the feeling of the city changes. The open grandeur of the avenue gives way to a more contained, focused atmosphere. The plaza inside is vast enough to hold tens of thousands of people, an entire urban population gathered to witness whatever sacred drama unfolded here. In the center of this great square stands a smaller, stepped pyramid. At first glance, it seems plainer than the grand pyramids of the sun and moon. Its main facade is a bit unassuming, a reconstruction of sloping stone walls. But as you walk around to the back of it, you stop, and you stare. Here, preserved for centuries because a later construction phase was built over it, is one of the most astonishing sights in all of Mesoamerica. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. The pyramid's face is a repeating pattern of sublime and terrifying beauty. Jutting out from the stone walls are dozens of massive, sculpted heads, carved with an almost alien precision. They alternate in a rhythmic pattern. First, the head of a great serpent, its fanged mouth agape, its body covered in what look like stylized feathers. Its neck is ringed by a ruff of plumage, like a divine collar. This is one of the earliest and most powerful representations of the deity that would later be known to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl and to the Maya as Kukulkan. The feathered serpent, a being that embodies the duality of sky and earth, of flight and crawling, of life-giving water and the underworld. Alternating with the serpent heads is another, more enigmatic figure. It's a blocky, abstract head with large, circular goggle-like eyes and 2 rings above its snout. For a long time, this was identified as Tlaloc, the Aztec god of rain and storms. More recently, scholars have suggested it might be an early version of a divine caiman or a crocodile, a symbol of the Earth's surface floating on the primordial waters. Or perhaps a headdress worn by the serpent itself. It's a bit like seeing a picture of a cartoon character from 1,000 years ago and trying to guess its backstory. You can see the details, but the context, the cultural punchline, is lost. Whatever its precise identity, its presence alongside the serpent creates a powerful symbolic pairing, a cosmic statement carved in stone. The entire facade is also decorated with carved seashells and marine motifs, as if the whole pyramid is emerging from a mythical sea of creation. You let your eyes trace the flowing lines of the serpents, the geometric precision of the goggled heads. The skill of the sculptors is breathtaking. But beneath the beauty of this temple lies a much darker story, one that was only revealed through archaeology in the 1980s. Beneath the foundations of this very pyramid, excavators found a series of mass graves. More sacrifices, but these were different from the offerings at the Pyramid of the Moon. Deep under the temple's center, a single high-status individual was buried with a wealth of jade, obsidian, and shell jewelry. But radiating out from this central burial were others. Along the pyramid's sides, groups of 18 individuals were buried together, and then more groups of 20. In total, the remains of over 200 people have been found, sacrificed to consecrate this building. The majority of them were young men, likely warriors. Many were found with their hands tied behind their backs. Analysis of their teeth reveals that they were not native to Teotihuacan. They grew up hundreds of miles away, in different regions of Mesoamerica. They were captives, brought to the heart of the empire to be sacrificed. But here is a chilling detail. Many of them were buried wearing necklaces made of imitation human jawbones, crafted from shell, some with real human teeth dangling from them. Others wore collars of real maxillae, the upper jaw of a human skull. They were dressed as warriors, perhaps even honored in some way, before being sent to their deaths to sanctify this temple to a fearsome god. It's a grim reminder that empires are often built on blood, and that divine power in the ancient world often demanded the ultimate price. Historians still argue whether these mass sacrifices were a one-time event to dedicate the temple, or if they represent a regular, ongoing ritual practice that was central to the Teotihuacano state's ideology. You look up again at the serene, powerful gaze of the feathered serpent heads. Knowing what lies beneath them changes how you see them. They are no longer just beautiful sculptures. They are guardians of a tomb, witnesses to a foundational act of ritual violence that cemented the power of this place. The citadel was not just a stage for priests and processions. It was an abattoir, a place where the lives of outsiders were used to fuel the cosmic engine of the Teotihuacan state. As you stand there, a quirky, almost absurd detail comes to mind. We know from chemical analysis of skeletons found elsewhere in the city that many Teotihuacanos, especially the elite, consumed pulque, a fermented alcoholic beverage made from the maguey plant. It was a sacred drink, but also a social one. It's strange to imagine, but it's entirely possible that the priests and architects who planned these deeply solemn and brutal sacrifices might have relaxed at the end of the day with a nice, frothy bowl of pulque, complaining about the quality of the limestone plaster or the price of imported macaw feathers. The sacred and the profane, the brutal and the mundane, always live side by side. The citadel represents the formal, public face of Teotihuacan's power. It's a place of overwhelming scale and grim ceremony. But this was also a city of over 100,000 people. They didn't all live in grand plazas or on top of pyramids. They lived in sprawling residential compounds, had families, worked jobs, and created art that tells a very different, more intimate story of life in this great city. To understand Teotihuacan, you must leave the ceremonial heart behind and wander into the neighborhoods where ordinary people lived out their lives, a world away from the serpent's gaze. You leave the imposing silence of the citadel behind, turning your back on the great avenue and the stern faces of its pyramids. You walk eastward, away from the ceremonial core, and the city begins to change. The monumental scale gives way to something more human. You are entering the residential districts of Teotihuacan, the sprawling labyrinth of neighborhoods where the vast majority of its population lived. What you find is not a collection of simple huts or haphazard houses. Instead, you are walking through a city of apartment compounds. These are large, single-story, multifamily dwellings enclosed by high, windowless outer walls. From the outside, they look like stone fortresses presenting a blank, uniform face to the narrow streets that run between them. But if you could step inside one, you would find a different world. You pass through a narrow doorway and find yourself in a sunlit, open-air patio. This central courtyard was the heart of the home. Around it are arranged a series of rooms, living quarters, kitchens, and smaller private shrines. The buildings were designed to let light and air into the interior while maintaining a strong sense of privacy from the outside world. It's a design that feels surprisingly modern, like a blueprint for a minimalist condominium complex, just with more ritual sacrifice. A little joke to lighten the mood. It is within these compounds that you find the true artistic soul of the city. The walls were not bare stone. Just like the temples, they were covered in that smooth white lime plaster and painted with breathtaking murals. But the subject matter here is different. You still see the gods and their symbols, the goggle-eyed storm deity and the feathered serpent, but they are joined by scenes that feel closer to daily life. You see paintings of coyotes processing in a feathered procession, jaguars blowing conch shell trumpets, and spiders spinning cosmic webs. One famous mural depicts a paradise-like realm, often identified as the domain of the storm god, where happy figures tumble and play amidst flowering trees and butterflies, a kind of eternal water park for the blessed dead. The colors are rich and vibrant, deep reds made from hematite, brilliant blues and greens from mineral clays, yellows from ochre. The style is distinctive, with figures often shown in profile, their forms flat and outlined in bold black or red lines. There's a consistent artistic canon at play here, a shared visual language that everyone in the city would have understood. Looking at these murals, you start to get a sense of their worldview, a world animated by divine forces, where animals acted as messengers for the gods and every aspect of nature was imbued with sacred meaning. You wander into what would have been a kitchen area. You might see the remains of a clay hearth and fragments of pottery. The Teotihuacanos were master potters, producing vast quantities of standardized ceramics. Their most iconic style is the thin orange, where a very fine, hard pottery that was made in a specific region nearby and traded widely across Mesoamerica. Finding a piece of thin orange pottery at an archaeological site hundreds of miles away is a sure sign of Teotihuacan's influence. You also find tripod cylinder vases, often decorated with stucco and paint, which were the height of elite tableware. It's comforting to know that even in an ancient city governed by cosmic alignments, people still appreciated a nice set of dishes. This was a city of artisans. Beyond the potters and muralists, Teotihuacan's greatest industry, the one that powered its economy and projected its influence, was obsidian. Obsidian is a volcanic glass, sharp enough when fractured to create a blade many times sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. The area around Teotihuacan was rich with obsidian deposits, particularly a beautiful green variety from a source called Pachuca. The city controlled these mines and, in workshops scattered throughout these residential compounds, they mass-produced obsidian tools. You can imagine the scene. Entire neighborhoods filled with the distinctive sound of flint knapping, the sharp tick, tick, tick of stone striking stone as craftsmen expertly shaped the obsidian into razor-sharp spear points, dart heads for their atlatls, a type of spear thrower, and long, prismatic blades. These blades were a technological marvel, struck from a prepared core in a way that produced perfectly uniform, incredibly sharp implements. These were the high-tech exports of their day, and they were traded all the way to the Maya kingdoms and beyond, a tangible symbol of Teotihuacan's economic might. This control over the obsidian trade was likely a key pillar of the city's power. Life here was highly organized. Evidence suggests that many of these apartment compounds were organized by craft or by kinship. You might have a potter's neighborhood here, a shell worker's district there, and a compound for obsidian knappers just down the street. There is even evidence for foreign enclaves. A merchant's barrio has been identified where pottery and artifacts from the Gulf Coast region of Veracruz have been found, suggesting a community of traders lived here, ambassadors from a distant culture. More famously, there is a Zapotec barrio, a neighborhood where people from the Monte Alban region of Oaxaca lived, maintaining their own distinct pottery styles and burial customs for generations. Teotihuacan was a cosmopolitan city, a melting pot of different peoples from across Mesoamerica, all drawn into the orbit of its immense power. However, life wasn't all just prosperous trade and beautiful art. A strange and somewhat unsettling tidbit comes from the skeletal remains of the city's inhabitants. Many show signs of dietary stress, particularly a reliance on a maize-heavy diet that, without proper preparation, a process called nixtamalization, can lead to nutrient deficiencies. For all its grandeur, life for the average person may have been a grind. Historians still argue whether the centralized state controlled food distribution to the populace, creating a dependency that reinforced social control, or if each residential compound was largely self-sufficient in feeding its inhabitants. The high walls of the compounds could have been as much for keeping people in their place as for privacy. You pause in another sun-drenched courtyard, looking at a faded mural of a jaguar. The cat is adorned with a feathered headdress, its paw raised as if in a formal gesture. It's elegant, powerful, and serene. This was the world of Teotihuacan, a place of high art and grim sacrifice, of cosmic order and craft production, of immense collective power and individual, everyday lives. But this complex, vibrant, and powerful world was not to last. As you stand in the quiet ruins of this neighborhood, you can almost feel a shadow beginning to fall. The story of Teotihuacan is not just about its rise, but also about its sudden, violent, and deeply mysterious end. The final chapter of the city is not one of creation, but of fire and silence. You find yourself drawn back to the Avenue of the Dead, the great stone spine of the city. The sun is lower in the sky now, casting long shadows that stretch from the temple platforms, making them look like dark fingers reaching across the ancient road. There's a different quality to the silence now. It's no longer just the quiet of abandonment. It feels heavier, laden with the weight of a great, unanswered question. What happened here? Why did a city of this size, this power, this influence simply stop? The end of Teotihuacan was not a gentle decline. It was not a slow, graceful fading into obscurity. It was a collapse, swift and violent. Around the year 550 AD, a great fire swept through the city. But this was no accidental blaze. Archaeological evidence is clear. The fire was deliberate and targeted. The great temples along the Avenue of the Dead, the administrative buildings within the citadel, the palaces of the elite, these were the buildings that were systematically looted and burned. The sculptures of gods and rulers were smashed. The murals were defaced. The very heart of the city's power was ritually and violently terminated. You walk toward the citadel, imagining the scene. Not the quiet ruin you see today, but a place filled with smoke, the roar of flames, and the crash of falling stone. You can almost see the feathered serpent heads, their serene stone faces obscured by soot, watching as the symbols of their power are torn down. This was an act of desecration, an iconoclasm. But who was holding the torch? This is the core of the final mystery of Teotihuacan. For a long time, the prevailing theory was that the city was destroyed by outside invaders. Perhaps nomadic warrior groups from the north, the Chichimecs, swept down from the arid plains and sacked the great metropolis. It's a classic story, the fall of a decadent empire to vigorous barbarians. But the evidence doesn't quite fit. There are no signs of a massive, pitched battle at the city's edge, no widespread destruction of commoner housing. In fact, many of the residential apartment compounds were left relatively untouched by the fire. The destruction was surgical, aimed squarely at the symbols of the ruling class and the state religion. This suggests the fire was not lit by foreign hands. It was an inside job. The most likely culprit? The people of Teotihuacan themselves. Imagine a society stretched to its breaking point. Perhaps a series of prolonged droughts, which we know occurred in Mesoamerica around this time, led to crop failures and famine. The divine rulers and priests, whose job it was to mediate with the gods and ensure the rains came, would have been seen as failures. Their cosmic contract was broken. The elaborate rituals, the endless construction projects, the sacrifices of captives, none of it was working anymore. The gods were not listening. You can picture the slow-burning anger in those apartment compounds you just walked through. The common people, the artisans, the farmers, suffering from food shortages while the elites in their lavishly decorated palaces continued to demand tribute and labor. Perhaps a powerful faction within the city's complex political structure, a rival noble house, or a council of fed-up military leaders, decided to make a move. The destruction wasn't a mindless riot. It was a revolution. A targeted coup d'état that decapitated the regime by destroying its ideological foundations. They didn't just want to change the rulers. They wanted to kill the very idea of the state that had existed before. Historians still argue whether this collapse was a rapid, explosive event over a few weeks, or a more drawn-out process of civil strife and political decay that culminated in a final, fiery conclusion. After the fire, the city wasn't entirely abandoned, not at first. A smaller, poorer population lingered in the ruins for another century or so, living in the less damaged residential compounds. They were like squatters in the shadow of their own fallen empire. But the central authority was gone. The grand workshops fell silent. The obsidian trade fractured. The great city that had once been the sun in the Mesoamerican sky became a ghost town, its monumental avenues slowly being reclaimed by weeds and silence. You look up at the pyramid of the sun one last time. It survived the fire, too large to be truly destroyed. But its temple was gone, its purpose extinguished. You think about the bizarre little details of this place. The mica floors imported from Brazil. The necklaces of imitation human jawbones. The fact that the city's inhabitants might have suffered from a form of pellagra due to their diet, a deficiency which, in severe cases, can cause dementia and confusion. It's a strange, almost darkly funny thought. A civilization at the peak of its power, meticulously mapping the cosmos while potentially suffering from a collective vitamin deficiency. The grandeur and the grit, always intertwined. As the last light of the day paints the volcanic stone in hues of orange and purple, you feel the profound weight of this place's story. Teotihuacan is a powerful lesson in the fragility of power. It shows how a society can create something magnificent, something that seems eternal, and how quickly it can all be swept away, leaving behind more questions than answers. The people of Teotihuacan left us no grand histories of their kings, no epic poems of their conquests. Their legacy is the city itself, a silent, magnificent, and haunting testament to their ambition, their faith, and their ultimate, mysterious failure. They are a ghost civilization, and as you turn to leave, walking away from the Avenue of the Dead, you feel like you are leaving a ghost behind. The city returns to its silence, a silence that has persisted for over 1,000 years. It waits, patiently, for the next person to walk its grand avenues in wonder, to try and piece together the story of the serpent's gaze, the city of gods that was ultimately reclaimed by its own people. The heartbeat of humanity, a global history of the drum. Settle in. Let the world outside fade away and listen to the first, most fundamental rhythm you know. The soft, steady beat of your own heart. Thump, 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 thump. It's a rhythm that has accompanied you for your entire existence. A quiet, internal drum that marks the passage of your life, second by second. It is the first music you ever heard, muffled and deep from within the womb. Humanity's connection to rhythm is not learned. It is innate. It is the beat of life itself. And now let's travel back. Back before cities, before empires, before the written word. Back to a time when the world was vast and new, and humanity was a small, flickering flame in the immense darkness of prehistory. You are there, sitting in the mouth of a cave. The night is a wall of impenetrable black, filled with the clicks, cries, and rustles of unseen things. Your only comfort is the fire. It crackles and spits, casting dancing shadows on the rock walls behind you. It is your warmth, your protection, your beacon. And it has a rhythm. The pop of a bursting sap pocket, the low hiss and crackle of the burning wood. You feel the rhythm in your chest. And without thinking, you begin to tap. Your fingers drum against your thigh, a simple, absent-minded pattern. Tap, 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 tap. It's a small act, but it is the beginning of everything. You are no longer just a passive listener to the world's sounds. You are adding your own. You feel the pulse. You strike your own chest, a hollow, resonant sound that mimics your heartbeat. You stomp your feet on the hard-packed earth, a solid, grounding beat that says, I am here. This is the first drum kit, your own body. It's portable, requires no maintenance, and is always with you. The hands that can craft a flint spearhead can also clap out a rhythm. The feet that can track a deer can also stomp out a dance. For tens of thousands of years, this was enough. The human body was the percussion instrument of choice for rituals, for celebrations, for storytelling around the fire. But then comes a discovery. One day, you find a fallen log, hollowed out by termites and time. You strike it with a heavy branch, perhaps in frustration, perhaps in simple curiosity. And instead of the dull thud of solid wood, you hear something new. A deep, resonant boom that echoes through the forest. It's a sound that has volume, a voice that carries. It's a sound you can make, a power you can wield. You've just found the world's first slit drum. No complex instruction manual, no warranty, and thankfully no software updates. It is pure, simple, resonant sound. This is the moment the drum separates from the body and becomes a tool, an instrument. And soon, you see the possibilities everywhere. A tortoise shell covered with a piece of dried gut. a frame of wood with a piece of uncured animal hide stretched across it, left out in the sun to dry. When you first tap its surface, the sound is tight, sharp, and loud. A tack that cuts through the air. You have created a membrane, a vibrating surface that can be tuned, however crudely, by tightening or loosening the skin. This is not just speculation. While drums made of perishable materials like wood and animal hide rarely survive the ravages of millennia, we have found clues. In Neolithic sites in China, archaeologists have unearthed drums made from alligator skins dating back over 7,000 years. And the evidence goes back further. In caves across the world, from France to Australia, early humans discovered that the cave itself could be an instrument. This is a wonderfully strange and true tidbit. In certain chambers, stalactites and stalagmites, when struck, produce clear, resonant musical tones of different pitches. These lithophones, or stone instruments, have been found with clear percussion marks on them, showing they were played repeatedly. You can imagine your ancestors, deep in the belly of the earth, creating eerie, beautiful music in a cathedral of stone, their rhythms echoing in the darkness. Why did they do it? What was the purpose of this primal pulse? Archaeologists and anthropologists still debate whether these first rhythmic sounds were purely for ritual, a way to connect with the unseen world, or if they served a more practical purpose, like coordinating a group hunt or simply passing the time. Was it a call to the spirits of the animals painted on the cave walls? A way to achieve a trance-like state in commune with ancestors? Or was it the prehistoric equivalent of a work song, a way to get everyone chipping flint or scraping hides in a coordinated, efficient rhythm? The answer is likely all of the above. The drum was never just one thing. Imagine a group of you, huddled around that fire once more. One person is tapping on the hollow log. Another is striking a stretched hide. A third is clapping their hands. You have just invented the first band practice, and quite possibly, the first noise complaint from the cave next door. The rhythms begin to intertwine, to speak to one another. You find a shared pulse, a collective heartbeat. In a world of constant danger and uncertainty, this shared rhythm is a powerful force. It builds community. It synchronizes your very nervous systems, creating a bond of shared experience that is deeper than words. It turns a scattered group of individuals into a unified whole. The sound you make echoes out into the night. It is a statement of presence, a declaration of life and identity in a world that is often hostile. The only critic was a saber-toothed cat who probably wasn't a fan of the new direction your art was taking, but even it might have been momentarily deterred by the strange, unified noise. This simple, primal pulse, born from a heartbeat and nurtured by firelight, is the seed from which all of music's complex history will grow. It is a seed that will soon travel out of the cave and into the village, where it will learn to do more than just echo. It will learn to talk. That primal pulse you discovered in the cold, dark cave does not fade. It travels. It journeys across millennia and continents, carried in the memory and muscle of countless generations. Now you find yourself in a different world. The damp chill of the cave has been replaced by a warm, heavy air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth after a brief rain. You are in a village in West Africa, perhaps in the lands of the Yoruba or the Akan people. Life here is communal, lived out in the open, under a vast, sun-bleached sky. In the center of the village, under the shade of a broadleaf baobab tree, sits a man. He is a master drummer, a griot, a keeper of histories. And in his lap, or held firmly under his arm, is an instrument that is both a drum and a voice. It is shaped like an hourglass, its wooden body carved from a single log. Two heads, made of goat skin or another fine hide, are stretched over either end, held together by an intricate web of leather cords. This is the dundun, the talking drum. The drummer beckons you closer. You sit on the packed earth before him. He doesn't speak. He simply begins to play. First, he strikes the head with a curved, mallet-like beater, producing a single, clear note. Then, as he strikes it again, he squeezes the leather cords that run the length of the drum's body, pressing it against his side. The pitch of the drum rises, soaring upwards in a smooth, vocal-like glide. Doo-dee! He relaxes his arm, and the next note is low again. Doo-dee-doo-dee-h. He is not just playing a rhythm. He is speaking. This is the secret of the talking drum, and it is a work of profound genius. Many languages in West Africa, such as Yoruba, are tonal. This means that the pitch of a word determines its meaning. The word oko spoken with a high tone might mean husband, while with a mid-tone it means hoe, and with a low tone, canoe. A simple change in pitch creates an entirely different reality. A person not attuned to this could find themselves in a rather awkward conversation about taking their canoe to the market. The talking drum works by mimicking the tones, rhythms, and pauses of these languages. The drummer, by varying the pressure on the chords, can make the drumhead sing, raising and lowering its pitch to replicate the melody of speech. It is the original long-distance calling plan, with surprisingly good reception. The master drummer plays a phrase on the drum. It is a rapid, complex, and beautiful melody. Then he speaks the phrase aloud, and you hear the perfect echo. Ikaro, he might say, a morning greeting. And the drum says it back, Dodo mai, a faithful, resonant copy of his voice. He can use it to recite proverbs, to tell epic histories of kings and heroes, to call a specific person by their name from one end of the village to the other. In this society, individuals often had a drum name, a phrase associated with them that the drum could speak, a unique sonic signature. It was the world's first ringtone, and you couldn't set it to vibrate. The drum was the internet of its day, the town crier, the community bulletin board. It announced births and mourned deaths. It called warriors to arms and citizens to a celebration. It was also the ultimate tool for gossip, as a message played by a master could be heard for miles, meaning your private business could become a public broadcast in a matter of minutes. But its role went far deeper than mere communication. The drum was a sacred object. It was the voice of the gods. Before a new drum can be used, it must be consecrated. This is not a simple act of tuning. It is an awakening. A quirky and fascinating belief is that the drum has a spirit, a soul that must be coaxed into speaking. Rituals are performed, libations are poured, and offerings are made to feed the drum and give it its voice. The choice of materials is also steeped in meaning. The wood might come from a sacred tree, and the skin from an animal with specific symbolic properties. The drum is not just a tool, it is a living entity, a conduit between the physical and the spiritual worlds. In religious ceremonies, the rhythm is a prayer. The drummer is not just a musician, he is a priest, a medium. His beat can summon the orishas, the deities of the Yoruba pantheon. Each god has their own specific rhythm, their own sonic pathway. A frantic, complex beat might call forth Shango, the god of thunder and lightning. A more fluid, flowing rhythm might invite Ashen, the goddess of the rivers and love. You watch as the drummer's rhythm builds, intensifies, creating a powerful, hypnotic pulse that seems to make the very air vibrate. The dancers respond, their bodies moving in time with the divine conversation. In this space, the drum's voice transcends language. It becomes a force of nature, a ladder for the gods to descend and for the human spirit to ascend. The heartbeat you first felt in the cave is now the heartbeat of the divine. Of course, the sophistication of this system is breathtaking. But ethnomusicologists still debate the precise extent to which these drum languages could convey entirely novel or abstract concepts, versus relying on a vast but ultimately finite vocabulary of pre-agreed phrases and proverbs. Could a drummer, for instance, spontaneously compose a detailed message about a completely new event, like the man in the strange hat has a goat that has climbed onto the roof of the elder's hut? Or was the language more a form of highly complex code, using established phrases to approximate new meanings? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a testament to a system that was both structured and brilliantly improvisational. The talking drum represents a profound shift in the story of rhythm. The pulse is no longer just a beat, it is a syllable. The instrument is no longer just a sound maker, it is a storyteller, a historian, and a vessel for the sacred. It is the voice of a community, binding them together with a shared language of rhythm. But this same power, the power to unite and communicate, would soon be seen as a threat. The drum's journey is about to take a violent turn, as its beat moves from the heart of the village to the chaos of the battlefield. The warm, communal air of the village square dissolves, replaced by something colder, sharper. The scent of wood smoke is now mixed with the metallic tang of steel and damp wool. You are standing on a muddy field somewhere in Europe, perhaps in the 17th or 18th century. A low mist clings to the ground, and the sky is a uniform, unforgiving gray. All around you are men, thousands of them, standing in rigid, perfectly aligned rows. They wear brightly colored coats, red, blue, white, that look almost absurdly cheerful against the grim landscape. This is a European army on the move, and the air is thick with a nervous, disciplined silence. And then you hear it, a single, sharp crack that cuts through the mist. Tap, a pause, then a cascade of sharp, rattling beats. Tiaror tap tap. Tiaror tap tap. It's the sound of the snare drum. A young boy, no older than 15, stands beside a grizzled officer. A heavy wooden drum, its calfskin heads pulled taut by a system of ropes, is slung over his shoulder. Stretched across the bottom head are strands of dried animal gut, the snares, which give the drum its characteristic, aggressive rattle. He is the drummer boy, and in this world of black powder and bayonets, he is one of the most important men on the field. The rhythm he plays is not a conversation. It is a command. In the deafening chaos of a black powder battle, with cannons roaring and muskets firing in great, smoky volleys, a general's shouted order would be lost in the din. The drum, however, cuts through. Its high-pitched, piercing voice is the Army's central nervous system. A specific, jaunty rhythm, known as the general, signals the order to advance. A long, rolling beat might mean to form a line of battle. A sharp, urgent tattoo could signal a retreat. Every soldier, from the rawest recruit to the most seasoned veteran, knows these drum calls as well as they know their own name. Their lives depend on it. This is the drum as a tool of absolute order, a metronome for mass violence. You begin to march. Your feet fall into a steady, relentless rhythm dictated by the drummers. Left, right, left, right. The beat is hypnotic, monotonous. It's a sound designed to do two things. First, it coordinates the movement of thousands of men, turning a crowd into a single, cohesive killing machine that can march for miles without breaking formation. It's the original click track for an army. Second, it works on the mind. The repetitive, driving beat overrides individual thought, subsuming fear and hesitation into a collective, forward-moving pulse. It's hard to feel existential dread when you're busy making sure your left foot lands on the downbeat. The use of drums in warfare is, of course, an ancient practice. The Romans used their own drummers to keep the legions in step. The formidable janissaries of the Ottoman Empire were preceded into battle by an entire orchestra of percussion. The mater, whose thundering drums, shrill pipes, and clashing cymbals were a form of psychological warfare, designed to terrify their enemies long before the first arrow was loosed. A rather curious historical fact is that these Ottoman military bands would later become a fad in 18th century Europe. Composers like Mozart and Beethoven wrote pieces in the Turkish style, alla turca, incorporating bass drums, cymbals, and triangles to mimic the exotic sound of the Janissary bands. The sound of terror on the battlefield became a delightful bit of musical decoration in the concert halls of Vienna. But it's here, in the age of line infantry, that the drum's role becomes so starkly, brutally clear. You see the enemy line now, a distant row of colored coats, their own drums echoing yours across the field. The drummer boy beside you changes his rhythm. A series of sharp, spaced-out taps. It is the signal to halt, prime, and load. You watch as thousands of men move through a practiced, multi-step ballet of pouring powder, ramming home a lead ball, and fixing a bayonet. The drum is the choreographer of this deadly dance. Then comes the long, terrifying roll, the signal to make ready. The tension is unbearable. The sound hangs in the air, a promise of the violence to come. And then silence. A brief, heart-stopping pause before the officers shout and the deafening crash of a volley. The drum has done its job. It has brought order to the very edge of chaos. This use of the drum was not without its own strange logic and internal debates. Military tacticians and historians still argue whether the primary psychological effect of the drum was on one's own troops, bolstering their morale and courage, or on the enemy, intimidating and demoralizing them with a display of implacable order. Was the beat for you, or for them? Perhaps it was for both, a single rhythm serving a dual purpose. This drum, the military snare, is a world away from the talking drum you encountered in the African village. Remember how the Dundan mimicked the tones and melodies of speech, how it was a voice of community and spirit. This military drum does the opposite. It is stripped of melody, of nuance. Its language is one of pure, unadorned rhythm. It doesn't ask, it commands. It doesn't tell a story, it dictates an action. It represents the use of rhythm not to liberate the spirit, but to discipline the body. It's the heartbeat of the machine, not the heartbeat of humanity. But even as this rigid, martial beat echoed across the battlefields of Europe, another story of the drum was unfolding across the Atlantic. It was a story of suppression, of memory, and of a beat that refused to die. The very same power that made the talking drum a tool of community in Africa would make it a symbol of rebellion and a target of fear in the Americas. The journey of the drum is now tied to the journey of people, and it is about to enter its most painful, and perhaps its most resilient chapter. The roar of the cannon and the sharp rattle of the snare drum fade, replaced by a humid, oppressive heat that hangs heavy in the air. You are no longer on a European battlefield, but in the Americas, perhaps on a sugar plantation in the Caribbean or a cotton field in the southern United States. The year is sometime in the 18th or 19th century. The world here is one of brutal subjugation. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying smell of sugarcane and the bitter reality of slavery. And here the drum is feared. You see, the talking drum you encountered, the one that could speak languages and send messages for miles, that same instrument arrived in the Americas, not as a respected tool of a griot, but in the memory of the enslaved West Africans forced across the ocean. The slave owners, the plantation masters, quickly realized the power this instrument held. They saw it not as music, but as a threat. A drum in the hands of an enslaved person was a potential telegraph, a secret communication system that could be used to coordinate escapes, to share information, and most terrifyingly of all, to plan uprisings. Remember the Stono Rebellion of 1739 in South Carolina? It was one of the largest slave uprisings in the British mainland colonies. The rebels, led by an Angolan man named Jemmy, used drums to signal their revolt and to gather more followers as they marched. They moved with a military discipline that shocked the colonists, a discipline rooted in their African origins, communicated by the beat of the drum. After this and other uprisings, the reaction was swift and brutal. Across much of British North America and parts of the Caribbean, laws were passed, the so-called slave codes, that explicitly banned enslaved people from possessing or playing drums, horns, or other loud instruments. The drum, that ancient voice of community and spirit, was now officially contraband. To play it was an act of defiance, an act that could be met with a whipping or worse. But you cannot legislate a rhythm out of existence. A beat is not something you can confiscate. It lives in the body. It resides in the memory. And so, the rhythm went underground. It became a thing of whispers, of hidden art. If you could not have a drum, you would become the drum. You see it happening now, in the brief moments of rest stolen at the end of a grueling day. A man begins to slap his thighs, his chest, his arms, creating a complex polyrhythm out of his own flesh and bone. This is patent juba, a powerful, expressive art form born directly from the suppression of the instrument. It is a perfect echo of humanity's first instrument, the body itself, now reclaimed as an act of cultural survival. The rhythm found a new home in the hands and feet, a portable and unconfiscatable drum kit. You see a woman using her washboard not just for laundry, but as a rasping percussion instrument. You see men using hollowed-out gourds, bones, or simple wooden boxes to keep a beat. In Cuba, enslaved Africans, denied their traditional drums, created music using wooden shipping crates, the cajones that would eventually give birth to the iconic box drum of the same name. It was an act of brilliant, defiant improvisation. They took the very symbols of their oppression, the containers that brought goods to the plantation economy, and transformed them into instruments of cultural preservation and spiritual resistance. A wonderful, if perhaps apocryphal, bit of lore says that the playing style of the cajon, with the musician sitting on it, was developed so that if a master approached, the player could quickly disguise the instrument as a simple stool. This need to preserve the sacred rhythms led to another incredible act of cultural fusion. In places like Cuba, Brazil, and Haiti, where the influence of Catholicism was strong, the old gods of Africa, the Orishas you met before, did not disappear. They put on masks. The powerful thunder god Shango, whose rhythm was once played on a talking drum, became associated with Saint Barbara. Ashen, the river goddess, was syncretized with Our Lady of Charity. The sacred rhythms were then attached to the Catholic saints' days and feast days. Historians and theologians still debate whether this syncretism was a conscious strategy of cultural camouflage, a way to hide the old religion in plain sight, or a more organic process of genuine belief, where enslaved people saw true equivalences between their deities and the Catholic saints. Whatever the motive, the result was that the sacred drum rhythms survived. In the ceremonies of Santeria in Cuba or Candomblé in Brazil, the beat is central. You find yourself in a small, crowded room, the air thick with incense and sweat. At one end, a trio of drummers plays the sacred bata drums, hourglass-shaped drums of different sizes that are considered the most sacred of all. They are not just instruments, they are consecrated objects believed to hold a divine spirit. The drummers play complex, interlocking patterns, a conversation between the three drums that calls down the Orishes. The rhythm is a living link back to Africa, a thread of memory that survived the horrors of the Middle Passage and the brutality of slavery. The forbidden beat refused to die. It simply learned to speak in a new accent. From this crucible of oppression and resilience, new musical forms would be born. The work songs sung in the fields, with their call and response patterns, contain the seeds of the blues. The complex rhythms of patent juba and the syncopated beat of the ring shout would lay the rhythmic foundation for ragtime and later for jazz. The beat that was once feared, suppressed, and driven underground would eventually resurface, stronger and more vibrant than ever. It would become the heartbeat of entirely new genres of music that would go on to conquer the world. The journey of the drum from Africa to the Americas is a story of profound loss, but also of unparalleled human creativity and the indestructible power of rhythm. The humid air of the plantation gives way to the electric hum of a modern city. The scent of sweat and soil is replaced by the faint smell of ozone, asphalt, and spilled beer. You are in a dimly lit, smoke-filled room in New Orleans, sometime in the early 20th century. A small stage is crammed into one corner, and on it, a new kind of magic is happening. A piano player lays down a syncopated, ragtime rhythm. A clarinet wails a bluesy melody, and a trumpet player improvises a soaring, brassy line. And holding it all together, in the back, is a single musician surrounded by a strange, new contraption. This is the birth of the drum kit, and it was born out of pure, practical necessity. In the early marching bands and dance orchestras of New Orleans, you would have had multiple percussionists. One person played the bass drum, another played the snare drum, remember him from the battlefield? And a third would handle the cymbals and other small percussion items, often called traps. It was a whole crew dedicated to rhythm. But as music moved indoors, into smaller clubs and dance halls, space and money became tight. A bandleader couldn't afford to hire 3 or 4 percussionists. They needed one person to do the job of all of them. So the first drum kits were assembled out of necessity and ingenuity. A drummer might place a bass drum on the floor and rig up a swinging beater that could be kicked with the foot. This invention, the bass drum pedal, is one of the most important and unsung innovations in modern music. The first patent for a practical bass drum pedal was issued in 1909 to William F. Ludwig, a name that would become legendary. This pedal liberated the drummer's hands to play the snare drum, which was now placed on a stand. A small cymbal was mounted on the bass drum, and soon, a lowboy pedal was invented to clash 2 cymbals together with the foot, the direct ancestor of the modern hi-hat. Suddenly, one person could be a complete, one-man percussion section. The modern drummer was born. You watch the man behind this strange collection of instruments. His right foot keeps a steady 4-on-the-floor pulse on the bass drum. Boom, 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 boom. His left hand lays down a syncopated, swinging rhythm on the snare, ta-cat, ta-cat. His right hand taps out a shimmering pattern on the cymbal, and his left foot closes the hi-hat on the offbeats. It's a complex coordination of all 4 limbs, a full-body dance that weaves together the deep pulse of the bass, the sharp crack of the snare, and the shimmering wash of the cymbals. This new music, this jazz, is built on a new kind of rhythm, the swing. It's a feeling, a lilt, a propulsive energy that makes you want to move. The rigid, martial beat of the snare drum has been liberated, taught to dance by the resilient, syncopated rhythms that journeyed from Africa. The drum kit becomes the engine room of popular music for the next century. It powers the big bands of the swing era, the frantic energy of bebop, the raw rebellion of rock and roll. Think of the thunderous, primal power of John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, his bass drum like a cannon shot, or the elegant, intricate precision of Neil Peart of Rush, surrounded by a veritable fortress of drums and cymbals. Each genre found its own voice on the kit, its own unique heartbeat. But even as the acoustic drum kit reached its zenith, a new pulse was beginning to emerge, this time from a world of circuits and silicon. You find yourself now in a studio, the air cool and sterile. In front of you is a small, unassuming box with a series of rubber pads and a few knobs. This is a drum machine. The Roland TR 808, released in 1980, is perhaps the most famous. Upon its release, it was a commercial failure. Its sounds, the deep, booming bass drum, the tinny hi-hats, the sharp cowbell, were considered too artificial, too unrealistic compared to a real drum kit. It was a quirky failure, destined for the bargain bin. But musicians, particularly in the burgeoning genres of hip-hop and electronic music, saw something different. They didn't hear a failed attempt to copy a real drum. They heard a whole new sonic palette. That famously deep, booming 808 bass drum, with its long, resonant decay, became the foundation of countless hip-hop tracks. The machine allowed producers to program beats with a precision that was humanly impossible. The rhythm was no longer just performed, it was programmed. It was data. The heartbeat you first heard in your own chest, the beat you hammered out on a hollow log, has now become a string of ones and zeros. This has led to a fascinating, ongoing debate. Musicians and critics still argue whether the use of drum machines and programmed beats represents a loss of the human element, the subtle imperfections and feel of a live drummer, or if it is simply the next logical evolution of rhythm, offering new tools for new forms of expression. Is a perfectly quantized beat soulful or sterile? The answer, of course, depends on who is doing the programming and who is doing the listening. Today, the drum is everywhere, in more forms than ever before. It's in the live drummer playing a rock show, the DJ mixing beats in a club, the intricate programming of a hip-hop producer, the meditative rhythm of a handpan player in a park, and the simple, satisfying tap of your finger on your steering wheel as you listen to the radio. The technology has changed almost beyond recognition, but the fundamental purpose has not. The drum is still a call to dance. It is still a tool for ceremony. It is still a voice of rebellion. It is still the sound of a community gathering. It is still the simplest way for us to connect with that primal, internal pulse that unites us all. From the first thump of a hand on a chest in a firelit cave, to the talking drum's voice echoing across the savannah, to the rigid march of the military snare, the defiant beat of the cajon, and the digital pulse of the 808, the story of the drum is the story of humanity's own heartbeat, externalized and amplified for all the world to hear. It is a beat that connects us to our deepest past and will undoubtedly power our future. All you have to do is listen. Reaching for the sky, the story of the Manhattan skyline. You're standing on the southern tip of an island. The air is cool and clean, carrying the sharp, briny smell of the salt marshes and the deeper, loamy scent of a dense forest just behind you. The sounds are of water lapping against a rocky shore, the cry of gulls, and the whisper of wind through the leaves of oak and chestnut trees. The ground beneath your feet is not flat. It rises and falls in a series of gentle, rolling hills. This is the island of Mannahatta, the island of many hills, as the native Lenape people know it. It is a quiet, green, and rugged place. And deep beneath your feet, sleeping under layers of soil and glacial till, lies a secret of stone, an ancient foundation that will one day make the impossible possible. For now, though, the only things reaching for the sky are the trees. The highest point on the island is a rocky outcrop, not a spire of steel. You can walk the entire length of this place in a day, tracing deer paths through the woods, your journey dictated by the natural contours of the land. It's a beautifully inconvenient landscape, completely unsuited for, say, a crosstown bus. Then a shift. The quiet is broken by new sounds. The creak of a tall ship's rigging, the murmur of a language you don't recognize, a guttural, northern European tongue. The Dutch have arrived. They build a small settlement at the island's southern tip, a cluster of wooden houses with stepped gables, a fort, and a windmill. They call it New Amsterdam. The transaction for the island itself is now the stuff of legend, a deal made for a handful of guilders' worth of goods. Historians still argue whether the Lenape, who had a communal and spiritual concept of land, even understood the European notion of a permanent, exclusive sale, or if they believed they were simply agreeing to share the land for a season. Whatever the understanding, the deal was done, and a new destiny for the island was set in motion. Decades pass. The city grows, but slowly. The British take over, and New Amsterdam becomes New York. The streets are still narrow and crooked, following the old Dutch paths. The buildings are low, made of wood and brick. The tallest structures are the church steeples, their spires acting as proud navigational aids for ships entering the harbor. They are the first, modest attempts to touch the sky, reaching up not in the name of commerce, but of God. You wander through the city in the 19th century. The forest is gone, replaced by a sprawling grid of streets. The 1811 Commissioner's Plan has been imposed upon the island's natural landscape, a triumph of rational geometry over the inconvenience of hills. Surveyors, with a vision that was either breathtakingly audacious or breathtakingly arrogant, laid out a relentless grid of streets and avenues, carving up the island from Houston Street all the way to the wilds of 155th Street. The island of many hills was being systematically flattened, its rugged character scraped away to make room for commerce and orderly development. The signature building of this era is the brownstone. You walk down a long, quiet street lined with these elegant, four-story row houses. Their reddish-brown sandstone facades create a harmonious, uniform streetscape. They are dignified, solid, human-scaled buildings. They speak of a city growing prosperous, a city of merchants and families. But they are limited. They are built with load-bearing walls of brick and stone. To build higher, the walls at the base would have to be incredibly thick, taking up valuable ground floor space. There is a natural height limit, an invisible ceiling, imposed by the very materials of their construction. The city can grow outwards, filling up the grid, but it cannot yet grow up. But the pressure is building. The city is a magnet, drawing in people and money from all over the world. The island is finite. It cannot get any wider or any longer. And that secret, the one sleeping beneath your feet, is about to be discovered. Let's go looking for it. Imagine you can see through the layers of asphalt, soil, and rubble. You would find that the island of Manhattan is essentially a massive, incredibly strong spine of rock. This rock is called Manhattan schist. It is a metamorphic rock, forged hundreds of millions of years ago by incredible heat and pressure, the result of colliding continents. It is ancient, dense, and fantastically strong enough to support almost any weight you could possibly place upon it. This is the geological secret. Manhattan isn't built on sand or soft earth. It's anchored to a bedrock of near unshakable stability. Now for the truly quirky part, the detail that explains everything about the skyline's future shape. This spine of schist is not uniform in its depth. At the southern tip of the island, in what will become the financial district, the bedrock is very close to the surface, sometimes just a few feet down. This makes it easy and relatively cheap to dig foundations and anchor a building directly into the stone. Then, as you move north from around Washington Square up to the 20s, the bedrock takes a dramatic dive, plunging hundreds of feet below the surface, hidden under a deep valley of glacial debris. Then, as you continue north into what will become Midtown, the schist rises again, once more coming close to the surface. This geological profile is the hidden blueprint for the skyline. It dictates where it is practical to build tall. It's why New York City developed two distinct clusters of skyscrapers, one downtown and one in Midtown, with a valley of lower-rise buildings in between. It wasn't a master plan or an aesthetic choice. It was geology. It was simply too expensive and difficult to dig the deep foundations needed for massive buildings in the area where the bedrock was far below. The iconic shape of the Manhattan skyline, that famous dip in the middle, is the direct result of what a glacier did tens of thousands of years ago. It's a bit like finding out the Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile is due to an inconveniently placed thumbtack just off canvas. So here you are, at the cusp of the late 19th century. The city is crowded. The grid is filling up. The price of land is skyrocketing. The pressure to maximize the value of every square foot of this finite island is immense. The ambition is there. The money is there. The solid rock foundation is there. All the ingredients are in place. The city is a coiled spring, ready to leap upwards. But two crucial pieces of the puzzle are still missing. Two inventions that will break through the invisible ceiling of the brownstone era and unlock the vertical potential of this island of stone. You are standing on a crowded street in the 1850s, a street lined with those familiar, dignified brownstones. The city is humming with the energy of commerce and invention, but it is still a horizontal city. And the reason is simple and human. While the island's bedrock could support a mountain, human legs could not. Or rather, they would not. People will happily walk up 4, maybe 5 flights of stairs. Beyond that, the inconvenience becomes a deal breaker. You can't rent out the 10th floor of a building if your tenants arrive sweaty, breathless, and plotting your demise. Any building taller than a walk-up was a commercial folly. The first barrier to the sky was not engineering, it was laziness. To go higher, you needed a machine to do the climbing for you. Hoists and lifts existed, of course. They were used in factories and mines to haul freight. But they were seen as terrifyingly dangerous. They were powered by ropes and cables that had a nasty habit of snapping, sending the platform and its unfortunate contents plummeting to the ground. You might trust your new shipment of textiles to one of these contraptions, but you certainly wouldn't trust yourself. Now you find yourself inside a vast, glass and iron exhibition hall in New York. It is 1854, the exhibition of the industry of all nations. The air is filled with the murmur of the crowd and the smell of hot metal and machine oil. In the center of the hall, a man named Elisha Otis stands on an open freight platform, which is being hoisted high into the air, some 3 stories up. The crowd watches, a mixture of curiosity and morbid anticipation. Otis, a showman at heart, orders his assistant to take a sword and dramatically cut the single rope suspending the platform. The crowd gasps. The rope snaps. The platform lurches, and then stops after dropping only a few inches. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the hall. Otis doffs his top hat and declares, "All safe, gentlemen. All safe." He had invented a safety brake, a simple but ingenious mechanism. A wagon spring at the top of the platform would engage with ratchet bars running up the sides of the shaft the moment the rope went slack, locking the platform securely in place. This demonstration was a turning point. It was a masterful piece of industrial theater that transformed the elevator from a dangerous freight hoist into a safe, reliable form of transportation. The psychological barrier was broken. The vertical journey was no longer a dance with death. It was a modern convenience. But making height accessible was only half the battle. You still had to build the tall building itself. And the problem, as always, was weight. Remember those brownstones with their thick, load-bearing walls? If you tried to build a 20-story building that way, the stone walls at the base would need to be 10 or 12 feet thick, just to support the crushing weight of everything above them. The ground floor would be all wall and no window, a dark, useless cavern. It was a structural dead end. The solution came not from masonry, but from metallurgy. The answer was steel. Imagine a new way of building. Instead of the walls holding up the building, you first construct a hidden skeleton, a rigid cage of steel columns and beams, all riveted together. This metal frame is what actually carries the building's immense weight, channeling it down into foundation points anchored deep in that solid Manhattan schist we talked about. The outer walls, the ones you see from the street, are no longer holding anything up. They are just a thin curtain, a skin of brick or terracotta hung on the frame to keep the rain out. This invention, the steel skeleton, freed the skyscraper from the tyranny of its own mass. It was a revolution that happened on the inside. Now, with the safety elevator to lift people up and the steel frame to hold the building up, the race to the sky truly began. You are now standing at the intersection of 5th Avenue and Broadway, looking up at one of the first true icons of this new age, the Flatiron Building, completed in 1902. It is not a sleek modern box. It is an ornate Beaux-Arts palace, a limestone wedge of Renaissance and Gothic details stretched impossibly upwards, 22 stories into the air. It rises from its triangular plot of land, like the proud prow of a great stone ship sailing up Broadway. It's an odd, beautiful, and slightly clumsy-looking giant. But it completely changed people's perception of the city. It created a landmark, a focal point. It also created a fascinating and slightly risque local phenomenon. The building's sharp, triangular shape created a powerful wind tunnel effect at its northern corner on 23rd Street. This unpredictable updraft had a habit of lifting the long skirts of women walking by, much to the delight of the young men who would gather on the corner to watch the show. It became such a popular spot for loitering that police officers would constantly have to shoo the gawkers away, shouting the famous phrase, 23 skidoo, a bit of early 20th century slang born from the quirky aerodynamics of the city's newest architectural celebrity. These new giants began to sprout all over Lower Manhattan. Buildings like the Singer Building and the Woolworth Building rose, each one taller than the last. They created the famous canyons of New York, narrow streets plunged into perpetual shadow by cliffs of stone and steel. The men who built them were a new kind of hero, the ironworkers, many of whom were Mohawk men from reserves in upstate New York and Canada. Photos from the era show them walking casually along narrow beams hundreds of feet in the air, with no safety harnesses, no nets, just a breathtaking sense of balance and a complete lack of any discernible fear. As you look at these early, ornate skyscrapers, you can sense a tension. They are revolutionary in their construction, but conservative in their decoration, dressed up in the historical styles of Europe. The city was reaching for the future, but it was still looking back at the past. Architectural historians still argue whether the primary driver of this early skyscraper boom was pure economic necessity, the need to maximize profit on expensive land, or if it was also fueled by a powerful sense of corporate pride and a competitive, almost adolescent, desire for prestige. Was the Woolworth Building so grand simply to make money, or was it also built to be a cathedral of commerce, a monument to the ego of its founder, Frank Woolworth? The city was transforming into a forest of stone. The quiet island of hills was a distant memory. The skyline was now a jagged line of ambition, a testament to the power of steel, steam, and the simple, profound invention of a reliable brake. But this was just the first generation of giants. The Roaring Twenties were just around the corner, bringing with them a new, sleeker aesthetic and a race to the sky that would become a global obsession. The ornate, Beaux-Arts decoration of those early giants begins to feel old-fashioned. A new energy is gripping the city. It's the 1920s, the jazz age, a decade of flappers, speakeasies, and a dizzying, almost frantic sense of optimism. The economy is booming, and the skyline is about to enter its most glamorous and competitive chapter. You are standing now in the heart of Midtown, and the air crackles with the sound of riveting guns, a percussive, machine gun-like chatter that has become the city's theme song. This is the sound of the Art Deco skyscraper being born. The new style is a radical departure from the historical fancy dress of the Woolworth Building. Art Deco is modern, sleek, and forward-looking. It embraces geometric patterns, stylized forms, and a sense of verticality. It's the style of the machine age, of speed, of luxury. Think sharp, clean lines, dramatic setbacks that create a cascade of terraces, and beautiful, intricate ornamentation made from chrome, steel, and terracotta. These buildings are not just tall, they have presence. They are designed to be seen, to be admired, to inspire awe, and to compete. Oh, how they competed. The late 1920s kicked off one of the most famous and wonderfully petty rivalries in architectural history, the race for the title of world's tallest building. Your first stop is 40 Wall Street, the headquarters of the Bank of Manhattan. The architect, H. Craig Severance, is determined to build the tallest building on Earth. His design is a handsome, powerful Art Deco tower, planned to reach a height of 927 feet. Construction moves at a breathtaking pace. This was an era of astonishing speed. The steel frame would rise at a rate of 4 stories a week. It was a carefully choreographed ballet of steelworkers, riveters, masons, and electricians, all swarming over the structure. As 40 Wall Street's gleaming, pyramid-like crown takes shape, it seems Severance has secured the title. But just a few miles away, in Midtown, another architect has other plans. You walk over to Lexington Avenue, where William Van Allen is designing a new headquarters for the automobile magnate Walter Chrysler. The Chrysler Building is a masterpiece, the absolute pinnacle of Art Deco design. It is a jewel box of a skyscraper. Its setbacks are adorned with beautiful, abstract brickwork. At its corners on the 61st floor, giant stainless steel eagles, modeled after the hood ornaments on a 1929 Chrysler, stare out over the city. It is a building that is unabashedly in love with itself, a chrome-plated hymn to the automobile age. The rivalry between Van Allen and his former business partner, Severance, was personal and intense. They were the original frenemies of the skyline. As 40 Wall Street nears completion, Van Allen publicly announces a revised height for the Chrysler Building, 925 feet, 2 feet shorter than his rival. It appears he has conceded defeat. Severance celebrates. 40 Wall Street is officially crowned the world's tallest building. But Van Allen had a secret, a trick up his sleeve, or rather, a trick up his building's dome. For months, inside the fireproof dome of the Chrysler Building, his workers had been secretly assembling a 185-foot-long spire, a magnificent multi-tiered vertex made of a special new chrome-nickel steel called Nirasta. It was assembled in 5 sections, hidden from the prying eyes of the public and, more importantly, from H. Craig Severance. On a single day in late 1929, the spire was hoisted up through the top of the dome and riveted into place in just 90 minutes. In one swift, brilliant move, the Chrysler Building grew to 1,046 feet. The title was snatched away. It was a magnificent architectural gotcha moment, a prank played on a global scale. 40 Wall Street's reign as the world's tallest building lasted less than a month. It must have been the most infuriating 90 minutes of Severance's life. But even as the Chrysler Building's spire gleamed in the sun, a new challenger was already rising just a few blocks away. The ambition of the era was insatiable. You walk over to Fifth Avenue, to the site of the original Waldorf Astoria Hotel. It has been demolished to make way for a project of almost unimaginable scale, the Empire State Building. If the Chrysler Building is a piece of exquisite jewelry, the Empire State Building is a statement of pure, streamlined power. It is less decorative, more restrained. Its beauty comes from its sheer, uncluttered verticality, its perfect proportions, its limestone and granite facade rising in a series of setbacks to a slender, iconic mast. It was a marvel of planning and logistics. The project, from first blueprint to final rivet, was completed in a scarcely believable 1 year and 45 days. Its steel frame went up so fast that people said you could watch it grow. One of the quirky facts about its construction is the system of small railways built on the rising floors, used to shuttle bricks and materials around the site quickly, a private, temporary transit system high in the sky. The Empire State Building reached its full height of 1,250 feet in 1931, easily taking the crown from Chrysler. But its timing was terrible. It opened its doors in the depths of the Great Depression. The magnificent tower that was meant to be a beacon of commerce was an economic disaster. It was so empty of tenants that it was mockingly nicknamed the Empty State Building. For years, a significant portion of its revenue came not from office rentals, but from the tourists who paid to ride the high-speed elevators. Remember those from Alicia Otis? To its observation decks. That famous mast at the top. It was originally designed and promoted as a mooring mast for dirigibles. The plan was for transatlantic airships to dock at the top of the building, allowing wealthy passengers to disembark and walk a gangplank directly into the heart of Manhattan. It was a wonderfully romantic, futuristic vision. It was also completely insane. The updrafts at that height were dangerously unpredictable, making any attempt to moor a giant, wind-tossed balloon a recipe for disaster. After a couple of half-hearted and terrifying attempts, the plan was quietly abandoned. The mast remained, a beautiful but useless monument to a future that never was. Architectural critics still debate whether the Art Deco skyscraper represented the peak of beautiful, humanistic skyscraper design, or just a flamboyant, inefficient style that prioritized vanity over practicality. Was the Chrysler Building's spire a triumph of art or a colossal waste of space? This incredible, frenetic burst of construction gave Manhattan the iconic skyline that would define it for a generation. These Art Deco giants were not just office buildings. They were symbols of hope, of ambition, of a belief in a limitless future, even as the economic ground crumbled beneath them. But their reign would be challenged by a new, colder, and more rational architectural philosophy, one that would trade ornate spires for unadorned glass boxes. The exuberant, decorative fever of the Art Deco era cools. The Great Depression and the Second World War put a long, deep freeze on skyscraper construction. For almost 2 decades, the skyline you saw crowned by the Empire State Building remains largely unchanged, a frozen tableau of 1930s ambition. When the building boom finally returns in the 1950s and 60s, the mood is entirely different. The romanticism is gone, replaced by a cool corporate modernism. You are now standing on Park Avenue, and the architecture reflects this new spirit. The style is called the International Style, and it is a world away from the Chrysler Building's flamboyant eagles. The new ideal is the glass box. The mantra is less is more. Decoration is seen as frivolous, even dishonest. A building should be a pure, rational expression of its structure. You see it in buildings like the Seagram Building and Lever House, sleek towers with skeletons of steel, sheathed in skins of glass. They are elegant, minimalist, and beautifully proportioned. They are also, to some critics, a bit soulless. They are machines for working in, not cathedrals of commerce. These buildings changed the very texture of the city. Before, the skyline was a collection of individual, sculptural objects, each with its own personality. Now the ideal was the plaza. The new towers were often set back from the street, creating open, windswept public spaces at their bases. This was a result of a 1961 zoning law that allowed developers to build taller towers if they provided public open space. It was a well-intentioned idea, meant to bring light and air to the dense city grid. The result, however, was a string of towers that felt disconnected from the vibrant street life below, each one inhabiting its own sterile bubble. The cozy, canyon-like feel of the older streets was replaced by a more open, but also more impersonal, landscape. But the ambition to build tall had not vanished. It was simply dormant, and in the late 1960s, it reawakened on a scale that dwarfed everything that had come before. You travel back down to the southern tip of the island, to a gritty, rundown neighborhood of old electronics stores known as Radio Row. The entire neighborhood is being cleared to make way for a project of staggering audacity, the World Trade Center. The vision, championed by David Rockefeller, was to create a new hub for international trade that would revitalize Lower Manhattan. The architect, Minoru Yamasaki, was tasked with designing a complex that could contain 10 million square feet of office space. Rather than building a cluster of smaller towers, Yamasaki and his team made a bold decision. They would consolidate all that space into 2 towers, taller than anything on Earth. You watch as they rise. The Twin Towers were a complete departure from the skyscraper tradition. They were not steel skeletons draped in a curtain wall. Their revolutionary design was the tube frame. The load of the building was carried almost entirely by a dense grid of steel columns on the exterior walls, creating a rigid, hollow tube. This freed up the interior, creating vast, open floors with no need for internal columns. They were minimalist to the extreme. 2 colossal, unadorned square prisms, soaring 1,368 feet into the sky. Their construction was a saga of immense challenges. To build their foundations, a massive trench had to be dug down to the bedrock. Remember that solid Manhattan schist? And a thick concrete slurry wall had to be built to hold back the waters of the Hudson River. The bathtub, as it was known, was an engineering marvel in its own right, a giant underground dam protecting the tower's foundations. A quirky but amazing byproduct of this massive excavation was the creation of a whole new piece of New York City. The nearly 1.2 million cubic yards of rock and soil removed from the site were used as landfill to create the adjacent neighborhood of Battery Park City, a 92-acre expanse of land where there was once only water. They didn't just add to the skyline, they literally expanded the island. When the towers were completed in the early 1970s, the public reaction was mixed. Many architectural critics were horrified. They called them filing cabinets, the boxes the Empire State Building came in. They lacked the romance of the Chrysler Building, the solid grace of the Empire State. They were seen as monolithic, inhuman, and overwhelming in their scale. But for New Yorkers, they slowly became a part of the city's fabric. They were a landmark you could see from anywhere, a constant, reassuring presence on the horizon. They were the twin goalposts of the sky. They became famous for more than just their height. In 1974, a French high-wire artist named Philippe Petit spent months planning an audacious, illegal stunt. In the dead of night, he and his team snuck to the roofs of the 2 towers, strung a steel cable between them, and as the city woke up, Petit stepped out onto the wire. For 45 minutes, he walked, danced, and even lay down on the wire, a quarter of a mile above the ground. It was an act of breathtaking, poetic madness that humanized the 2 stoic giants, transforming them for a moment into a stage for a beautiful, impossible performance. The Twin Towers represented the peak of a certain kind of American modernist confidence. They were a statement of pure, unadorned structural power. They held the title of world's tallest, only briefly before being surpassed by the Sears Tower in Chicago, but that hardly mattered. They redefined the southern tip of the island and became the new, iconic silhouette of New York. Urban planners still debate whether the massive superblock design of the World Trade Center was a successful urban renewal project or a mistake that destroyed a vibrant, human-scaled neighborhood and created a sterile zone that was dead after 5 p.m. The skyline they created, with the 2 flat-top towers dominating the south and the spired Art Deco giants holding down Midtown, would become the definitive image of New York City for nearly 30 years. It was a skyline of immense stability, a symbol of financial power recognized the world over. It felt permanent, unchanging, but the story of the skyline has always been one of change, of destruction and rebirth. And its most profound and painful transformation was yet to come. You find yourself on a clear, blue September morning. The skyline stands as you know it, a familiar and reassuring panorama. The 2 great towers anchor the southern tip of the island, their flat tops catching the early light. The Empire State and Chrysler spires command Midtown. It is a skyline that feels eternal, a symbol of strength and permanence etched into the global consciousness. And then in a few short hours, everything changes. The story of the skyline is not just one of construction, it is also one of loss. The destruction of the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001, was a trauma inflicted not just on a city, but on its very identity. The towers that were once criticized for being inhuman and monolithic became, in their absence, deeply human. Their loss left a hole in the sky, a phantom limb that New Yorkers could feel every time they glanced south. The smoke that rose from Ground Zero was a funereal pyre for the age of modernist certainty they had represented. For years, the site remained a wound, a vast, 16-acre pit where 2 of the world's largest buildings once stood. The debate over what to do with the site was agonizing and deeply emotional. How do you honor the dead while allowing the city to heal and grow? How do you balance memory and commerce, sacred space, and the relentless pressure for new development? The answer, when it came, was a complex tapestry of remembrance and rebirth. You stand now at the heart of the rebuilt World Trade Center. At the very center are the two memorial pools. They are vast, square voids, occupying the exact footprints of the lost towers. Water cascades down their black granite walls into a seemingly endless depth, a powerful and constant representation of absence. It is a soundscape of sorrow, a place for quiet reflection. The names of every person lost in the attacks are inscribed in bronze around the pools, a permanent litany of loss. But around this sacred space of memory, the skyline began to reach for the sky once more. The new plan was not to replicate the past, but to create a new kind of urban space. A collection of towers, designed by different architects, would rise around the memorial, framing it. And at the heart of it all, a single, defiant spire would reclaim the sky. You watch it grow. One World Trade Center, initially dubbed the Freedom Tower, rises from the northwest corner of the site. Its design is one of elegant symbolism. It rises from a square base, the same dimensions as the original towers. As it ascends, its corners are chamfered back, so the square transforms into a perfect octagon at its midpoint, and then culminates in another square at the top, rotated 45 degrees from the base. The effect is a crystalline, sculptural form that appears to shift and change its shape as you move around it. It reaches a symbolic height of 1,776 feet, a direct reference to the year of American independence. It became the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, a statement that New York was not afraid to build tall again. But it is a different kind of tall. Its design incorporates unprecedented safety features born from the trauma of 9/11. A massively reinforced concrete core, extra-wide stairwells, advanced fireproofing. It is a fortress in the sky, a giant built with the hard-won lessons of its predecessor's fall. And it wasn't alone. You look south of the memorial and see another strange and wonderful addition. The Oculus, the new World Trade Center transportation hub, designed by Santiago Calatrava. It is a structure of pure, skeletal white, a soaring construction of steel ribs and glass that looks like a dove being released from a child's hands. It's a piece of extravagant, optimistic architecture, a stark contrast to the somber voids of the memorial pools. It is a space of light and movement, a symbol of transit and connection. It's also famous for being one of the most expensive train stations ever built, a quirky fact that led to endless debate about its budget, but one that also gave the city a new, breathtaking public space. Meanwhile, a new kind of race to the sky has begun, not just at Ground Zero, but across the entire island. This time, the competition is not just for height, but for thinness. You look toward Midtown, at a new breed of skyscraper rising south of Central Park, along a stretch now known as Billionaire's Row. These are the Supertalls, or pencil towers. Thanks to advances in concrete engineering and wind-damping technology, architects can now build incredibly tall, incredibly slender residential towers. Buildings like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and 111 West 57th Street soar to heights rivaling the Empire State Building, but on footprints that are astonishingly small. 111 West 57th, for example, has a height-to-width ratio of about 24:1, making it the most slender skyscraper in the world. It looks less like a building and more like a line drawn against the sky. Urban critics and city residents still argue fiercely whether these super slender towers are elegant additions to the skyline or simply empty safety deposit boxes in the sky for the global super rich, casting long shadows over Central Park and contributing little to the city's civic life. You stand now, perhaps on a ferry in the harbor, looking at the Manhattan skyline as it exists today. It is a living document, a vertical history book written in stone, steel, and glass. You can still see the spire of a 19th century church. You can see the ornate Art Deco crowns of the Chrysler and Empire State Buildings. You can see the clean, modernist lines of the mid-century towers. You can see the great, solitary spire of One World Trade Center holding vigil over the south. And you can see the impossibly thin lines of the new Supertalls piercing the clouds. The quiet island of hills is gone forever. But in its place is something else. A testament to geology, to invention, to ambition, to tragedy, and to an unshakable, relentless drive to rebuild and reach ever higher. The skyline is never finished. It is always a work in progress, a restless, beautiful, and complicated reflection of the city itself.